5th, 2011 meeting of the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County. We're going to begin with an invocation by Pastor Doug Vogt of the First Church of God, and that'll be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Commissioner O'Brien. Please rise.
Let's pray. Almighty God, how we thank you for this new day. We thank you for the opportunity to live in this county, how blessed we are. We thank you that you are a God who cares, who knows the affairs of men. You know our thoughts. You know our needs. We thank you that you are operative in this world and helping us, guiding us, protecting us. We thank you for the truth of the biblical record, the Bible that teaches us to walk in your ways. We thank you for this meeting this morning. I pray that you'll guide all of the individuals in this room, that you would guide our commissioners, give them the special direction that they need from you, Almighty God. We thank you for your ability to help us, to solve problems, to make decisions, to forge ahead in new directions. We pray you'll give us the grace to change where we need to change, or make corrections or adjustments where it's appropriate. We thank you for your presence, your power, and we pray that you would help us all to walk in your ways and to please you this morning. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Pastor Vogt. Under item 4, additions and deletions to the agenda, emergency items, we've had a request from staff to delete 13E. Are there any other additions or deletions to today's agenda? Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion to approve from Commissioner Fleischer, a second from Commissioner Davis. All in favor? Aye. The agenda as amended passes 5-0. Next up, we have proclamations and presentations. And I'm honored to give the first presentation today, which will be a presentation of a proclamation honoring the recipients of the 2011 Dan K. Richardson Award, Dr. A. Ronald Hudson and Mr. Carter Hopkins. Mr. Hudson and Mr. Hopkins, if you'd just come up to the podium, please. And if you have any friends or family that you'd like to come up with you, please ask them to join you. So as I said, I'm very happy today to read this proclamation honoring the recipients of the 2011 Dan K. Richardson Award, Mr. A. Donald Hudson and Mr. Carter W. Hopkins. Good morning, gentlemen. Whereas the Dan K. Richardson Humanitarian Award was established to identify and publicly recognize those citizens who actively pursue opportunities to improve the quality of life for all who live and work in Indian River County. And whereas this year, the 6th annual Dan K. Richardson Humanitarian Award is being presented to Dr. A. Ronald Hudson and Mr. Carter W. Hopkins for their lifelong commitment to philanthropic endeavors that have directly benefited the residents of Indian River County. And whereas Dr. A. Ronald Hudson is one of the visionaries who saw the need for a family organization in the Gifford community, and along with other community leaders, spearheaded the effort to build the Gifford Youth Activity Center. And whereas Dr. A. Ronald Hudson began his career as an educator at the former Gifford Elementary and worked at the Gifford High School until 1969. In addition, he served as assistant superintendent for the Indian River County School District and was principal of the Vero Beach Elementary School, Vero Beach Junior High School, and Vero Beach High School. And whereas Mr. Carter Hopkins, a successful real estate broker and businessman, relocated to Vero Beach 2 decades ago and is a supporter and promoter of the Gifford Youth Activity Center since its beginning. And whereas Mr. Carter Hopkins was a member of the Gifford Youth Activity Center Board of Directors for 9 years, and in 2002 co-founded the Gifford Youth Activity Center Foundation and continued to serve as its chairman into 2010. And whereas Dr. A. Ronald Hudson and Mr. Carter Hopkins have demonstrated a heartfelt desire to improve the lives of the residents of Indian River County and have demonstrated that commitment repeatedly by their active involvement in various groups and by volunteering their time and talents. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Indian River County Board of County Commissioners that Dr. A. Ronald Hudson and Mr. Carter Hopkins, recipients of the Dan K. Richardson Humanitarian Award, be honored and emulated for their exemplary contributions to our community, duly adopted this 5th day of April 2011 and signed by all 5 members of the Board of County Commissioners. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Do you have any words?
We just thank you very much.
Well, we thank you for all the work that you've done in the community and appreciate it. The community's much better off for the work that both of you gentlemen have done. And I know the Gifford community particularly appreciates every action that you've taken over the years. And we thank you on behalf of all the citizens of Indian River County. It looks like Commissioner Davis wants to say something, so I'll pass it over to him.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is, I don't want to say unfortunate, but it is something that those individuals that have been in this community for quite a while understand tremendously, and that is to the family of Mr. Richardson and the awards and the legacy that his family will leave here in Indian River County. Being here for the length of time that we have, we understand clearly what this award means and how prestigious it really is. And with both of you being highly involved in education, as you know, that was Mr. Richardson's passion, from his scholarships to now the Dollars for Scholars, and helping those individuals in this community to want to further their education, be a part of that, and making it quite frankly possible. And Dr. Hudson, if I'm not mistaken, I think they left off there. Didn't you used to be a principal or assistant principal at Sebastian River Middle School also?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. And I just want to let y'all know that
How many times were you at the principal's office?
in the 7th grade, I was a knucklehead. And
What do you mean?
and I just want to let you know that Dr. Hudson helped put me on the path of the straight and the narrow in the 8th grade. For that, I want to say thank you. And it was a rather stinging experience. And but thank you for what you've done. But sincerely, this is quite an honor, and I think you know it. But I just didn't want to let it pass without saying that I see the work you've done, not just in the community, but personally. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to say that thank you for the recognition here this morning. But I have been blessed to have lived, worked, and live here in Indian River County. And I would just like to say that if I have enhanced or touched anybody's lives, it makes me feel very good, and it gives me great confidence of satisfaction. And I really thank you from the depths of my heart.
Well, and I don't think it's an if, it's how many. It's how many.
I just want to say that he was my homeroom teacher at Gifford High School. He was like a father, a role model as a father when we was at Gifford High School in 1967.
That's true. Thank you, dear. Thank you.
Commissioner Wheeler?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, I've lived here 40 years or so, and in every community there's a dozen and a half people that stand out, and when you move to a community, you hear their name, and you learn who they are over the years. And Dr. Hudson happens to be one of those few in the community that you hear about when you move here, just like Elma Lee Loy or Mr. Lundy or many people. So you're kind of an icon in this community, and I appreciate all you've contributed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Gentlemen, please come on up.
Thank you.
Thank you for everything you did. Thank you. Must have had your hands full with him, huh?
Dr. Hudson, Freddie wants a picture. He's got a place for it already.
You guys know how to do it,
We're trying, buddy. We're trying.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, buddy.
Next, we have the presentation of a proclamation honoring Lieutenant Joanne Baker on her retirement from the Indian River County Sheriff's Department. Commissioner Wheeler will present to Lieutenant Joanne Baker. Ms. Baker, Officer Baker, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Joanne.
Good morning.
This gives me a great pleasure to be the one to read your proclamation and to present it to you. I worked with you over there, and you did a great job, and I see many of the members of the Sheriff's Office and Corrections Division here in support of you, which that in itself is an honor to show respect for what you've contributed over the last 30 years. So I'd like to read this, and this is a proclamation honoring Lieutenant Joanne Baker on her retirement from the Indian River County Sheriff's Department. Whereas Lieutenant Joanne Baker was born in 1951 and raised in Indian River County. And whereas Lieutenant Baker was hired by Sheriff Tim Doback on April 13, 1981 as one of the first female corrections officers. And whereas Lieutenant Baker was promoted to Corrections Sergeant on August 13, 1982, becoming the first female sergeant in the Corrections Division. And whereas Lieutenant Baker was promoted to Corrections Lieutenant on June 25, 1990, becoming the first female lieutenant in the Corrections Division. And whereas many of the accomplishments and successes of the Corrections Division are a direct result of Lieutenant Baker's dedication to the corrections profession, to the Indian River County Sheriff's Office and the citizens of Indian River County. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida, that the Board acknowledges the contributions of Lieutenant Joanne Baker has made to the citizens of Indian River County during her successful career and wish her a happy and prosperous retirement, signed by all 5 board members. Would you like to say something, Joanne?
Yes, first of all, I'd like to say thanks to each and every one. I'm going to start a new phase. My new phase will be my retirement.
All right, yeah.
And my friends. And I have members of my family here. They are ready for me, you know, to start my new life. So I'd like to say thanks once again to each and every one. I enjoyed it. I had plenty of memories, 30 years of good memories. But they always say, you save the best for last, and this was the best. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Sheriff, did you want to say anything?
No.
Yes, just briefly, it is a remarkable day in Indian River County. Lieutenant Baker, as you know, served from 1981 to the year 2001, and 2011 for a total of 30 years. In 2001, it should be noted that she was our first programs director in the Corrections Division, and throughout her 20 years as the program director, Lieutenant Baker was tasked with many organizations and outside of the Sheriff's Office, not only, but the inmate training, to include a variety of religious programs, Narcotics Anonymous, substance abuse, health department cases and classes, GED for juveniles and adults, and later our most recent reentry program and our Steps to Freedom. In fact, under Lieutenant Baker's guidance, she has been able to screen and guide members of the inmate population to get their GEDs while incarcerated. And to Lieutenant Baker's credit, she has coached and trained and obtained more GEDs through the Indian River County Sheriff's Office than any other adult education program in the county throughout her 20 years. She is to be commended, and I say thank you to her.
Commissioner Fletcher wanted to say a couple words first.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you noticed or anybody else noticed, but there seems to be a little bit of a tug of war here. I see the family members. I see your sister and your mom here, and you have a lot of good friends here. But the sheriff was standing just to your side, and I just saw a little bit of tug of war here going on. And you know, when you said you're going to start your retirement, I think there's at least one guy in the room that has different thoughts. There's something about volunteering. So good luck on your tug of war. And thank you.
Congratulations. Get over here, Commissioner.
There you go, John. Senate.
We've got a videographer too. Freddie, you might have another position coming up. Was that real quick?
Next up, we have the presentation of a proclamation designating April 10th through the 16th, 2011 as Crime Victims' Rights Week in Indian River County. Commissioner Fletcher will present to Ann Ferrara and Paul Zelno.
Thank you,
Good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity. In a perfect society, there are no victims, but unfortunately, this is not an imperfect society. We're no different from anywhere else in this great nation. We do have victims, and it's just, we're blessed to have a victims assistance program and victims assistance representatives, volunteers that complete the cycle to ensure that our victims are attended to from the onset of their victimization. With that, I'd like to read the following proclamation designating April 10th through 16, 2011 as Crime Victims' Rights Week in Indian River County. Whereas each year approximately 20 million Americans suffer the indignity of being a victim of crime and often experience emotional, physical, psychological, and financial harm as a result of being a crime victim. Whereas more than 30 years of progress of crime victims stand on the shoulders of dedicated advocates and brave victims who overcame shame, isolation, indifference to gain a voice, rights, and respect. And whereas being a nation devoted to liberty and justice for all, we must increase our efforts to protect, restore, and expand crime victims' rights and services to apply every victim, every time. And whereas the National Crime Victims Week provides an opportunity for us to reshape the future of victims by honoring the past and reflecting on hard-won victories, and to recommit to working together to insist on better treatment for victims and help them overcome the harm that is caused by crime. And whereas Indian River County is joining forces with victim services programs, criminal justice officials, and concerned citizens throughout the county to raise awareness of victims' rights and observe the National Crime Victims' Rights Week. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida, that April 10th through the 16th, 2011 be designated as Crime Victims' Rights Week in Indian River County, and that the Board honors crime victims and those who serve them during this week and throughout the year, adopted this 5th day of April 2011, signed by all 5 county commissioners.
Thank you for your support for the National Victims of Crime. My name is Paul Zelno, and I live in Indian River County, 1670 51st Court. And I, along with many other living throughout the county, are victims of crime. On February 1st, 2004, my wife was killed by a drunk driver at 5:30 in the afternoon on 27th Avenue. The guilty party had a blood alcohol of 0.24, 3 times the legal limit for impairment. As a member of the Indian River County Victims' Rights Coalition, our goals are to make our community safer and support victims of crime throughout the county by supporting fundraising events, working with law enforcement, the Indian River County Sheriff's Office, the City of Vero Beach Police Department, the State Attorney's Office to provide much-needed financial support to victims of crime. I, along with other panel members, speak to court-ordered convicted DUI offenders once a month at a victim impact panel to help reduce the number of drunk drivers on the roads. The calendar of events in which we are involved includes proclamation ceremony, women's self-defense class, remembrance ceremony, memorial vigil, an appreciation ceremony, and all culminates in a memorable musical performance. Vero Beach Sings for the Victims on Sunday, April 17th at the Wexlax Theater at St. Edward's School at 3 o'clock. We'd love to see you there. Tickets are $20 for adults and $10 for children. We honor those victims in this community whose lives have been devastated by crime and welcome your support for this, the National Victims of Crime Week. Thank you.
Well, I have your proclamation.
Thank you.
And I truly appreciate it. team doesn't go too far away. Shirley made sure she was here for the presentation. Oh. It's Freddie.
Scoot down one more. Come down a little bit more. There you go. All right, good.
I got you out here. What's up?
You should start charging people.
We next have the presentation of a proclamation recognizing National Telecommunicators Week. This will be presented by Commissioner Davis to Sandy Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Fox. And the crew.
She's got a few.
Absolutely. Sandy, welcome.
Good morning.
This is a proclamation recognizing National Telecommunications Week. Whereas emergencies can occur at any time that require police, fire, or emergency medical services. And whereas when an emergency occurs, the prompt response of police officers, firefighters, and paramedics is critical to the protection of life and preservation of property. And whereas public safety dispatchers are the first contact our residents have with emergency services. And whereas public safety dispatchers are a vital link for our police officers, firefighters, by monitoring their activities, providing them with information, and ensuring their safety. And whereas public safety dispatchers are more than a calm and reassuring voice on the other end of the line, they are the unforeseen first responders. They are knowledgeable and highly trained individuals who work closely with police, fire, and medical personnel. And whereas Indian River County's Sheriff's Office public safety dispatchers answered 63,319 emergency calls and 223,153 administrative calls for the year of 2010. They dispatched 137,095 calls for services for law enforcement and 22,991 for fire rescue. And whereas public safety dispatchers daily serve the public in countless ways without recognition by the beneficiaries of their service. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida, that Indian River County recognizes and honors April 10th through April 16th, 2011 as National Telecommunications Week. Adopted this 5th day of April 2011, signed by all 5 county commissioners. And with that, whenever we had the discussion about the PSAP centers, I had had the opportunity to stop by not just the Sheriff's Department, also the City of Vero Beaches, to witness firsthand what actually goes on. Probably everybody in this room has actually probably called 911 and had an experience with someone like yourselves answering, but to go on the inside and look out as far as what you do and how you make the determination of where the call gets transferred to, and how you in fact start to give life-saving instructions when needed instantly is an incredibly stressful job, which I know I'm preaching to the choir as I'm looking at you, but it is an extremely stressful position that you put yourself in, and on behalf of all the residents of Indian River County, I'd like to say thank you.
With almost 40 years as a public safety dispatcher, I wanted to say that I'm very grateful that we finally recognize our telecommunicators nationally. As for Indian River County, we do provide EMD, or emergency medical dispatch, by providing pre-arrival instructions. We also know that we're very instrumental in assisting with helping apprehend criminals and saving lives. So I commend the men and women for the job that they do. Thank you.
Commissioner Wheeler?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that, I know Sandy and some of the girls there, and I'll tell you what, And I caught flack for this last time, but I still will say that I think you've got the most difficult job in the sheriff's office. There's nothing more difficult than dealing with the unknown in high-stress situations, and deputies and corrections officers are on scene and have some form of control. You're on the other end of a hard line talking to people with no control, and not only that, but to sit in a dark room all day long, answer call after call after call. It's amazing the work you do, and I've always felt that the 911 center in this county is one of the best run I've seen.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Fletcher?
Well, it seems we've gone full circle with the proclamations today, and it's a great honor. It's been a great honor to work with each and every one of you during my time in the Sheriff's Office, and I invite all of my colleagues to sit beside these individuals as they're working to just observe the seamless transition from giving a little direction to saving a life. And I for one, have been always awed by your performance and your professionalism. And I want to thank you personally, because by the time we get to the call, sometimes it's halfway sorted out before we get there. And thank you very much for your dedication.
Call 911.
Now, if you turn around, you will see Freddie.
An accident right here.
Talk about a celebrity gathering.
You coming back next week, Freddie?
Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, team.
Next up, we have the approval of the minutes. Chair will entertain a motion.
Chairman, move that we approve the minutes of February 15, March 1, and March 8 of 2011.
Second.
We have an omnibus motion by Commissioner O'Brien, which is seconded by Commissioner Wheeler. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Thank you, gentlemen. We move now to the consent agenda. Would anybody like anything pulled from the consent agenda?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like item O, please.
Repeat that, 8-0? We have 8-0. Any others?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to pull item K.
K, and I'd like to pull F. Any others?
Move as amended.
We have a motion for Commissioner Fletcher to approve the consent agenda as amended. A second from Commissioner Davis. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Passes 5-0. We'll go begin with 8-0.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Davis is going to lead the discussion in 8-0.
Yeah, just a couple of things. On this, the only thing that really I have a concern about is I like where it started and all that kind of stuff, but the adjustment, not knowing where fuel prices are going, how prudent would it be to have this come back again in the event that they continue to rise? And so I just wanted to throw that out for discussion to see. I know this probably took quite a bit of staff time to come up with something that was halfway reasonable, and just to keep it from coming back before us on a continuing basis.
Chris Morrow, Public Works Director. We did look at the overall cost of Ranger's request for a fuel cost adjustment, and then the Budget Office also looked at what that adjustment could mean if we were to see a 20% increase in the price of fuel. And it worked out to almost $410,000, almost $411,000, which was $128,000 above Ranger's actual request. So what we did is we recommended approval for the Phase 2 sand volume at their actual request. and we capped it at their request. If it were to go above that, we could always revisit that, but this change order approval would just give them what they've asked for in their change order request.
All right, so you're expecting it to come back then? I mean...
No, we're not expecting to come back. It's just that we felt that we didn't want to recommend to the board anything above what they were actually asking for at this point.
Just a quick question then, among the board members, at what point do we kind of acknowledge that we might be in a petroleum bubble here of some kind? And at what point may it be cheaper to actually start to evaluate to spread this process out a little bit with the permit versus continuing to do what we're doing right now, especially with, I think this board is unanimous up here as far as wanting to complete the project from the discussion that I heard last time. So with these prices escalating, it may make sense here to see what it would cost us to continue the permit on this phase 3.
The staff has evaluated this, and there's a few things. First of all, we're very concerned about the cost. We think that most people that bid usually have a range which they're bidding the fuel to go up 10%. That's what we think. The other thing is your exposure is less the sooner they get the project done. And as you all know, and the longer it takes them to get the project done, the more our costs go up in engineering, the more. So if you give them all this latitude, I do believe you're starting to lose control of the project. As a staff member, we're already more now than it would have cost to go offshore with the next change order. So we've got to be careful. So what we're trying to do is be fair, minimize your exposure, trying to get the project done on time like it should have been done, which is another problem because the longer it goes out, the more our monitoring requirements go out, the more engineering. So that's why we looked at it this way. We tried to cap it.
I would like to know what those figures are, if we could have some, if the board kind of would like to know that also. I mean, don't do the work just for me, but I would like to know what it is going to cost in the event that we decide to extend it. I know we've got that additional engineering, and we've got some unforeseen factors as far as the price of commodities, but I'd like to know that.
Okay, well, we have put together some preliminary numbers on the budget. We've calculated that we're going to need about another $700,000 in engineering and additional monitoring if we were to go into late 2011. In other words, a phase 3 or a phase 2 remainder type of situation. The contractor is, by his production rate that we've seen so far, and we were going to get into this a little bit later with the Sector 3 update, but we had originally projected that he was going to be short the phase 2 amount of sand anyway. We had projected we'd need 280,000. He was saying he could make 220. We were projecting 200. Now there have been some developments at the mine that are going to bring that number down even further. They've had one of their 2 dredges become disabled there at the Ranch Road Lake mine. From what we understand, they've made the decision not to repair that dredge, so they're just going to move forward through the end of this month. Remember, we got to be off the beach May 1st, so they've got through the end of April with just a single dredge operating. We calculate they're going to make about 160,000 cubic yards of sand. So, in short, they're going to be about 100 to 120,000 cubic yards short. That's going to force us to make a decision either to move into a phase 3 or just truncate the job and not do the north mile of beach or so. So we've got some decisions to make. We could wait until the end of April and see how it pans out, or we could move forward with a contract extension if the board desires. But in the effort of full disclosure, it is going to cost us more money, probably on the order of $700,000 in additional engineering and monitoring costs. Because remember, if you go into another year, you've got to monitor the beach for 3 years post-construction. So you add another year onto that. So we'd already be into year 1 of the phase 1 post-construction monitoring, which was finished in 2010. We'd have the immediate post-construction monitoring for phase 2. And then we'd be adding a 3rd year at the tail end of the project for another year of monitoring for phase 3 if we were to go that route.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, if I could just, when you say year, I'm assuming you're meaning turtle nesting year versus calendar year?
Well, it would be another year from when the project completes. So if you finish, let's say we extended it and they began work in November of 2011.
Right.
And say they finished in December or January. You have to count 3 years, and James, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think they go 3 years from the date that template of beach is completed, correct?
Yes, James Gray, County Coastal Engineer. Basically, what we need to do is there's an immediate post-construction monitoring. So phase 1, we had immediate post-construction monitoring. This year, we start phase 1, first year post-construction monitoring. Phase 2, whatever's completed, will have immediate post-construction monitoring, and then another year or 3 years of monitoring. So if we truncate the project or we continue the project, we'll still have to monitor for 4 years of monitoring, immediate post-construction, and 3 years of annual monitoring. And that's includes biological monitoring, sea turtle monitoring, and also surveying of the beach performance.
Okay, so it would be basically extending the project, assuming that it got finished in this calendar year, would be a 7-month extension of monitoring above and beyond what we typically be looking at. Right.
Mr. Chairman, just to follow up on that, Commissioner Davis, and we'll have this in a later agenda item under the Coastal Tech work order, but from how I look at it is if we had 4 miles of beach to do in phase 2 and we only got 2 miles done, we only should be paying for 2 miles of monitoring. Okay, is that we're not going to pay them for 4 miles that aren't completed. So that invoice should come in at half the cost. So I'd like to see these numbers, and we also need to tell Coastal Tech that when they come in for their work order, that if they're not doing the entire length of phase 2, that work order needs to be reduced proportionately the length that they're going to actually be doing the work. You know, there's a couple things that might overlap, like maybe the sea turtle monitoring, which would probably be the entire project. But when they're talking about doing surveys of the beach, they're not doing the part we don't get done. So that should be cut. The offshore hard bottom, we didn't put sand in front of the other. They don't have to monitor that. So Coastal Tech needs to come back and reduce that work order to be proportionate to the amount that they're doing. And so I think there may be a slight increase. I don't see a full-blown full year of monitoring required. We just need to tell Coastal Tech to adjust their work order.
And we do have a meeting with DEP on the 6th, so we are going to seek relief of these monitoring requirements. Right now, our permit specifies that we do have to monitor these sections also if we've not completed for pre-construction monitoring. So again, staff feels that we're in agreement that we should not need to monitor areas that we haven't completed. It's just the way our permit is structured right now, we have to. So we're going to seek relief on the 6th.
Thank you. Sir, name and address for the record, please.
Bob Schaefer with Ranger Construction. Back to the fuel index. We had originally given a number for the fuel increase, but then when we came back and discussed with staff and discussed with this board, you guys decided that you wanted to have an index so that it would float up or down with the changes in fuel. If that's going to be the case, then we shouldn't have a cap on it, because then we will have to come back again. And for this particular phase, we're only looking at another month of work.
Can I address that? What I said is we were all trying to work off the cuff that day, and I suggested we give them half the fuel increase to keep the job going and look at it and come back. That's what we did. There was no guarantee, and we looked at it and we think this is the best way to go.
Yeah, and there's no guarantee till we make our mind up. But whenever, my question is ultimately, where are the experts saying the price of fuel is going to wind up? Jason, what are you, in your professional organizations, are they telling you to get ready for what?
Yeah, my crystal ball is a little cloudy, but I would anticipate prices will go up from here if we're looking at continuing this on into next season in November. I wouldn't want to bet that the prices will be lower, but who knows where they'll be. I think as the events in the Middle East have been ongoing, if that stuff continues, that's going to be upward pressure. If the economic recovery takes hold, I think that's going to put upward pressure on fuel prices. So they could go anyway, but I would think they could possibly go up from here if I had to bet one way or the other.
Bob, what whenever y'all bidding right now, how do y'all bid jobs that whenever the fuel's so volatile right now?
Most of the projects we're bidding right now are all public projects that have a fuel index in them.
And how is that different than what's in front of us?
What I thought we were working on was a fuel index, which would take care of any up or down, but there is no cap typically.
Okay, so but this is in the event that this goes down, or fuel goes down, that index goes down.
There would be a credit. Right?
Okay.
Commissioner Wheeler?
Yeah, I appreciate where Wes is coming from, and I agree pretty much what Jason said. In 2008, we had a fuel oil bubble, hit $130, $140 a barrel. It's about 108 today. It was, and you're dealing with the commodities market. That's what got the city of Vero Beach in trouble with their electric plant. And other governments, when it was at the height, they thought they'd lock it in, and it came back down. Obviously, even experts don't know where this is going, but I can tell you that from my take, there's a lot more people as the world develops. China and other places are using more fuel. Secondly, anybody that plays the commodity market knows that the United States at some point in time in the near future is in for great inflation. And I think this time fuel's going to stay, and it's probably going to go higher. I don't think it's going to come lower. It's just in the last 3 years things have changed to make the situation even worse. They've stopped drilling in different places. So, it's anybody's guess, but I can tell you 3 years ago I thought it was a bubble, but not now.
Yeah, and that's the part that in looking at it, the only reason why we're even considering this today is clearly because of the fact that this project had been broken into 2 years by forces outside of our and their, I guess you could say, knowledge, even control. When Fish and Wildlife said that you're going to monitor this to make sure that the turtles nest properly in the sand placed on our beaches, it by default moved this into a 2-year project, and there was just nothing we could do about that at the time. And of course,
probably the overall bureaucracy creates more cost to this than anything else we're doing.
Clearly, yeah. Okay.
So, your pleasure?
I don't want this to keep coming back before us. I think we're all on the same page, and I don't know how to. I don't know enough about that index to feel comfortable throwing it out right now, because clearly that's not what's in front of us. But I want to get the job done, and anything we can do to go ahead and wrap this thing up, we should.
We like what we're recommending, which is a cap. This project, we basically opened our checkbook. We've done things we've never done. We're paying for things that don't get delivered. We've opened our checkbook as much as I think the county needs to. I think we need to encourage them to get as much as the job done right now to protect the citizens on the beach and everything. And and you have to give motivation. If we have an open checkbook, this thing's become an open checkbook, and we need to control it. I mean, we've awarded a bid now that's become more expensive than doing offshore, we have our concerns. So staff's trying to protect the citizens, trying to protect your outside, and I feel for them, but they bid it, and we've made a lot of concessions. I mean, we prepaid for the stockpile sand. We've done everything I think in our power.
No, I agree as far as the prepaid. I mean, for the sand that they're processing specifically for us has made it so that we can get this far along in the project. And I'm with what you're throwing out there, Joe. My biggest concern, I suppose, is that what we have here in front of us might actually slow it down, not get it done.
Well, certainly increase the speed of the process through this season.
Without a doubt.
And I think that's probably our greatest concern right now, is to try to get as much on the sand by May 1st as possible.
Yeah.
So if that helps focus your mind any? Well, Chair cannot make a motion, so I will interrupt this program to hear from Jason, and then we'll entertain the motion. Jason.
Thank you, Commissioner Solari. Just to add some detail on how we got there, we discussed at the prior meeting back in March this index possibility. However, as we talked about, we were going to look at it. Staff started looking at it, seeing that it could expose us to a much higher change order than Ranger had requested. So our concern was Ranger came in and asked for $1 per cubic yard, which was about $280,000, and we may make a counter offer that would result in the county costing the county $400,000. Now that may be, we may want to do that if the fuel prices fluctuate, but our concern was, you know, that's pretty poor negotiating. You asked me $280,000, I offer you back $400,000. So that was our concern, is that fuel prices continue to rise from here, we would be counter offering to Ranger more than they requested. So that's why we wanted to put the cap there to prevent it against that exposure. And just a 5%, the break even was basically a 5% increase from what the prices were on March 28th. The last week's index, and I think we're almost there right now. Fuel prices have risen. I think I saw 8 cents for gas. I'm assuming it's a similar amount for diesel fuel in the last week, so we're already there. So if we continue on, and unless fuel prices go down from where they are, we will be paying more in the change order than was originally requested of Ranger. So that was our concern. That's why we put the cap there to provide some upper end protection for the county.
Yeah, I know just last couple of days, I know a couple of the stations, they're regular, and gasoline has gone up. Diesel stayed about the same, even dropped a little. Generally speaking, diesel comes down during the warmer months, goes up in the winter months because of fuel oil up north. So I think you're probably still going to see some raises in diesel, but I think that it's going to level off a little quicker than gasoline does, at least for the season. But again, who knows? You know, the market's being manipulated.
Mr. Chairman, just to make sure the issue doesn't get missed, there is in the board package an issue of whether you intend the change order to apply only to the 260,000 or so cubic yards in Phase 2, or whether you intend it to apply to the roughly 280,000 of Phase 2 and the remainder of Phase 1.
Yeah, there are two options. The staff recommendation is option 2, which is covers a slightly less amount of sand. So we will ask that whoever makes the motion specify which option they're moving.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner O'Brien.
I think part of what the board has done here all along is we want to be fair. At the same time, I think we want to get the project completed. And when we set the baseline number of the index back in March of 2010, diesel was in, I think, $3 a gallon or so was the baseline. And up to that point, the processors and truckers and stuff had absorbed the fuel price increases up to that level. I think the board made a decision that we wanted to be fair to them and agreed to, you know, come up to adjust it to where we are now. I think going forward, you know, there's not a whole lot of work left to be done this season. And we're going to have to spend a lot of time deciding what we're going to do on Phase 3 and how we're going to cover that and the logistics, and there will be quite a bit of work massaging that. So I think in fairness, the contractor, even though there's no adjustment in the contract, to be fair, we are doing adjustment here. But I think the cap is probably fair at this point, Bob. Just the county's paying up 89 cents a gallon now as our contribution. And I think if it goes up a little further from here in the next couple of weeks, it might be back on your shoulders to absorb some of that, just kind of a back and forth sharing of the pain here. And like I said, I think for Phase 3, we're going to have to do a lot of discussion and working the logistics out of how that's going to happen. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve staff recommendation option 2, which is a fuel cost adjustment of up to $1 per cubic yard for the 261,077 cubic yards of Phase 2.
I'll second it. We have a motion and a second. Any other comments? All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Passes 4-1. Commissioner Davis dissenting. I believe that item K was pulled by, excuse me, that was Commissioner Davis dissenting. Did I say that?
Yes.
Okay. I believe item K was pulled by Commissioner Fletcher.
No, that was
you, Commissioner O'Brien, then. Item K.
Yeah, I just want to pull this for Chris to give us a little update. This basically is a little redesign of the intersection of State Road 60 and 43rd Avenue, where we've been trying for well over a year, I believe, to get a little slice of right-of-way from the city of Vero Beach. And this came up back in November when we were discussing the land swap with the city. And at the time, the city said, well, we don't want to complicate the land swap with these little right-of-ways. We'll be glad to work that out and get it done. We'll cooperate and yada, yada, yada. And 6 months later, I think we haven't had any response yet from the city. And, 43rd and 60 is a very dangerous intersection. I think the longer we're delayed on making the improvements there's going to be more lives in danger. And so, Chris, can you just give us an update on where we are in getting that little sliver of right-of-way from the city of Vero Beach?
Yeah, the portion of right-of-way that Commissioner O'Brien is referring to is a very small triangular piece on the north side of State Road 60, just east of 43rd Avenue in front of the Nino's restaurant. It's a very small piece, but it's not the only piece that we need to do the State Road 60 and 43rd intersection. There's probably a dozen or so other pieces that are still needed. We were going to, but this triangular piece is owned by the city of Vero Beach. There's another piece that was also being considered along the east side of 43rd Avenue, just north of State Road 60, actually north of the main relief canal. Those two pieces, the triangular piece and the piece on the east side of 43rd, were originally talked about in relation to the Dodgertown land swap. They were later removed from those negotiations, and the county is now moving forward with the swap of the two properties. Those two pieces are still in limbo. We've talked to the city about them, but we haven't been able to procure either parcel yet. But again, there are other parcels that we still need for the State Road 60 43rd intersection. But in answer to your question, Commissioner Brown, we don't have that small triangular piece yet from the city.
Okay. I just wanted to bring that up so we're all up to date on where we are with the city on that. With that, I'll move staff recommendation of item K.
We have a motion from Commissioner O'Brien, a second from Commissioner Davis. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. On item F, that was pulled by myself, and this is about putting an MTA in certain county offices. I believe this was driven by ATM in certain offices. I believe this was driven by the tax collector, and I applaud her for taking a proper customer service attitude. But there are two things in here which I have a little issues with. One is that this piggybacks onto a contract with an Orlando firm, so that we haven't given local banks an opportunity to bid on it. And second, there's a fee added to each transaction for the use of these ATMs, $250 of which the county would be, I guess, for the owner of the ATMs, they'd get about $2 or $250, but the county would see 50 cents per transaction. And when you're thinking about this at the tax collector's office, we're putting an ATM there, and these people are going to go to the MTA in order to pay taxes or fees to the tax collector and then get dinged an extra 50 cents for each transaction. And I have a problem with that. I mean, the taxpayers who are there to pay their taxes or fees have already paid for this administration complex in their taxes, and I just have a problem adding this extra 50 cents. It's a small amount, but it adds up to a few $1,000s over time, and I just as soon see these half dollars stay in the pants of the taxpayers.
Mr. Chairman, if you could.
Yes.
What is wrong with just using the credit card process? And I know there's a fee associated with it, and I think that would be a little bit more reasonable and I don't know whether we can call it a convenience fee or whatever, but I mean, basically, at least that way, you can use your credit card if you need to. If you don't want to use your credit card, you can use your debit the same way, and it come out of but a convenience fee has been something that I've seen used in other areas, or a discount for cash, or however you want to call it. There's several different ways of getting around the legalese of it.
Two things. One is the law. There's two things. One is some people don't have credit cards on that, and also there's a law that says that if when they're using the tax collector, they have to pay the credit card fee above it's a state law. They pay something like, I think, 2% above or 2.5% on a transaction, not just $2.50. The other thing is what they're running into, and the reason this is being rushed, and Commissioner Solari, Chairman Solari is right. The tax collector talked to me probably over a year and a half ago about this, and we didn't get it done, and then she took over the driver's license situation, and so, and she's needing, and people coming in there don't have credit cards, and they can use their ATM card, and this service doesn't. We put the charge on because we have electric and other issues that are going to cost us, and also most governments do put a user fee, but you are correct. We didn't go for a bid, and maybe we should give the local banks an opportunity, but it was my fault because I hadn't taken care of it, and I needed to get to it and rushed it and piggybacked. So that's it. But anytime you do a general government fee under state law, they add, I think it's 2% charge, or the credit card, any credit card charges must go up and above that charge, and it's whatever on every transaction, and it goes right to the individual, and it can be, depending on the bank, sizable.
But Mr. Barrett, if you can't establish a cost to the ATM, then I'm not going to agree that or buy into the idea that the electricity and the air conditioning for this ATM machine is going to be anywhere near 50 cents a transaction. I mean, I think it may be near 2 cents a transaction. And again, we have other things that go on in this building which we don't bill the individual users for, because this is already a taxpayer-paid complex. And it's one of those things that some things burn different commissioners. This one burns me. The idea of putting that other little tick on top of a taxpayer who's there to pay my taxes, or their taxes or fees already, I just have a problem with. Commissioner Wheeler?
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I would agree with you on the portion that we should bid this locally. If one of the local banks were to do this, probably a large percentage of the people that use that machine would not be paying a fee. If you're a Wachovia customer, it's my understanding, or a SunTrust or some of these banks, if you're their customer, it's their account, use the ATM, there is no charge, where this charges everybody. The other thing is I can also understand, and we should be as consistent as possible, with if there's a fee charge to get some portion of it, simply because, when you go to the tax collector's office to pay your taxes, you got to know you're going to need some cash. And, it goes right back to the 4% versus 8% property and how people, the discounts, you either take your checkbook or you take cash with you, or you pay the fee if you use the credit card, and that's the way business is done. But I would agree that we should at least put this out for bid and find out what's not only best locally, but what's the best deal we can get for the people using that machine. Commissioner Fletcher?
Mr. Chairman, I concur. I believe that conceptually this is a great opportunity to assist the public and service here at the complex, as well as for the utility payment as well. I believe that the ATM is long overdue. So, and I'd like to see it go out for a competitive bid with the local banks for many of the same reasons that Commissioner Wheeler has just expressed.
I'd like to mention two things. One is I tried to treat this like a business. Most businesses charge for you to put an ATM in their location, like the airports, and I was just, you say let's act like a business, and I was trying to act like a business.
Agreed.
And so I don't have to if you don't want me to. But also there's another situation here, is that the courthouse has also asked for one several years ago because passports, you need to have cash, and sometimes they won't take personal checks. So the courthouse asked one, so probably if we go out, we should also look one, because the courthouse asked one probably 15 years ago and has asked several years. So I think we need to look at those two locations. But that's the reason. And we also may look at, if we got to bid, if the commission would so wish, is rather than a transaction fee, maybe they give us a monthly amount for having their machine there.
And that's generally how it works.
Pardon?
It's the customer who's still paying for it. At the end of the day, it's going to be the taxpayer who pays for it. I think we ought to be going for the lowest fee amount per transaction and leave the small change in the taxpayer's pocket. I mean, he's already paying all the dollars. Leave him a couple cents.
Citizens are already
We're really splitting hairs here, but by the same token, the people creating the problem ought to pay for it.
It's not a problem. I don't see.
Anyway,
I cannot possibly see. One second.
I'll make a motion that we go out to bid.
I would, I'll second that, but, I'd almost like to, and I don't know, I really would like to look into exactly if somebody were to come in and try to grab one of these things out, what does it mean to us? I mean, I'm sure that they have them insured and all that, but I saw on the news last night, somebody picked one up with a payloader and put it in the back of the truck and drove off.
They do that quite frequently.
But in addition to that, if this is truly a service that is necessary, we've got other sites for the tax collectors, and I don't know whether there'd be some kind of economies of scale that we'd get a better deal by having one out west, up in Sebastian. I just don't know. It's something that in addition to just these two ATM machines, we might want to look into.
Well, actually, I believe the county administrator has probably mentioned 3 or 4. So would you like the motion to cover those spots where the county administrator feels that the ATMs would be appropriate?
Yeah.
I would make my motion that the county administrator get with staff, find out what we need and where, and then bring it back, or just go out to bid, or bring it back for final approval before they go to bid.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Wheeler, a second from Commissioner Davis. Any other discussion?
Yeah, I'll support the motion. I'm not sure what it's going to get us, because the banks themselves don't make the machines. They lease them from the same guy we're talking to, and they may eat that cost as a way to draw customers to their banking center so then they can sell them other products. I'm not sure what benefit they're going to get by having somebody come to our building and use an ATM. Somebody's got to pay for that machine, and I don't see the bank eating that for a remote location where they don't have a banking presence. So I'll support it. I'm just saying I don't think we're going to see much result from it.
Fine.
Just and throwing something out, whenever you go to certain supermarkets, there's ATMs out in front of them. And that's not a bank that I use, or whenever I use my card there, it doesn't charge me. Now, and I don't know whether that's something for us to pursue, because it's not necessarily branded as a bank, but it's the tremendous convenience to be able to get cash. So it might not be just banks we need to look into when we go out and bid for this.
Well, there are different networks, but
yeah.
Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0.
Ask for clarification. Am I allowed to try and make revenue off of this?
Yes.
Maybe.
Maybe. I'm saying no, so
all right.
that'll have
Maybe a minimum?
All right. Thank you.
Moving on, we go to departmental matters. Community development, this was deferred from the March 22nd meeting, which we all remember fondly. This is Dr. Leslie Tarr's request from the Board of County Commissioners rescind a $15,000 fine. And I believe this will be spearheaded by Mr. DuBois. Good morning, Roland.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. This is a request from Dr. Leslie Tarr that the board rescind a $15,000 fine imposed by the Code Enforcement Board for a dune vegetation removal violation. The subject property, Mr. Tarr's, was an oceanfront property in Atlantis subdivision located at 2252 Megan's Ocean Walk, just south of the moorings on the South Barrier Island. On the overhead is a pre-dune alteration photo. This is from 2007. It generally shows the layout of the property and the dune area, which in 2007 was vegetated. Just a few pictures, and then I'll get into the chronology a little more. But in September of 2010, county staff received complaints. Mostly, I believe it was from beach walkers who noticed that the dune had been altered at this location. And in September, this is a photo of the dune area taken on September 9th that shows that essentially the dune had been, vegetation had been cut down to ground level. Here's another shot of the property. We did go back out there, staff did, in January, a few months later, and we did not see any noticeable difference from the standpoint of regrowth. So this led county staff to suspect that more than just cutting, maybe an herbicide had been applied to the property. We also observed some remnants of sea grapes that exceeded the diameter threshold for what we call specimen trees. In this particular case, what's shown is a remnant that's approximately 6 inches in diameter. And again, another picture in January that shows substantially no regrowth. In September, again, we observed the destruction of the dune area, and at that time, we sent notice to Dr. Tarr that based on County Code Section 927.17, which is part of our tree protection ordinance, we calculated a fine under those procedures at $15,000, which again, I'll explain a little further on how we got to that number. It did go to the Code Enforcement Board in January for an evidentiary hearing. Dr. Tarr did attend that hearing, and at that meeting, the board found that the violation did exist, and they imposed a $15,000 fine. Also required that the Tarrs submit a dune restoration plan.
Roland, what was the time limit on that dune restoration plan?
It was actually about a week ago before the March Code Enforcement Board meeting. At the March meeting, however, since Dr. Tarr is appealing this matter and requested this board review, they granted an extension, so I believe it was a 30-day extension. So now we're looking at the end of April for that plan to be submitted.
Thank you.
Soon after the January evidentiary hearing, Dr. Tarr did file an appeal in circuit court of the board's order, and he also requested that the county commission consider rescinding the fine. As far as the section cited under the code for violation under 932.0611, it indicates that it's unlawful and subject to penalties of the tree protection ordinance for a person to damage, alter, trim, remove, or relocate any vegetation seaward of the county dune stabilization line without prior authorization and obtaining a county dune vegetation permit. I just want to point out that one of the reasons that there are severe penalties, particularly related to dune vegetation, is just the importance of the dune system in stabilizing the shoreline. The vegetation traps the sand, replenishing the beaches that are eroded, and this is part of the reason why the county's ordinances are particularly protective of dune vegetation. As far as the actual fine calculations set forth in the tree protection ordinance, under subsection 17.4, any removal or destruction of a protected tree is subject to a $1,000 fine, with each protected tree destroyed being a separate offense. It also indicates when you look at specimen trees, which are particularly in good condition, the larger trees, that fine can be up to $15,000 per tree, with each specimen tree being a separate offense. In the county's tree protection ordinance, sea grapes in and of themselves, as they're not located on the dune, don't have the same protection, but significant tree groupings of sea grapes on dunes are considered protected trees regardless of size. And the threshold for specimen trees for sea grapes, which are considered a smaller size tree, is greater than 5 inches diameter. In this case, staff identified at least one specimen tree in at least 15 protected trees that had been destroyed. And that led to our conclusion that a $15,000 fine was the calculated amount that would be recommended to the code board. Under Florida statutes 162, chapter 162, which sets forth the procedures for local code enforcement boards, there is a provision related to code board fines and liens that indicate that any lien arising from a fine imposed by the code board runs in favor of the local governing body, and the local governing body may execute a satisfaction or release of the lien entered by the board. So Dr. Tarr is aware of this provision, and that is why he is here requesting that this commission consider reducing or essentially rescinding the fine. Dr. Tarr has written a number of correspondences on this matter, and just to summarize some of the points from staff perspective that Dr. Tarr has made, not only in his correspondence but at the evidentiary hearing that he testified. He indicated that he and his wife are absentee landowners, that also they did not cut or authorize the cutting of the dune vegetation. He's a doctor on the Gulf Coast. and he presented information to that effect. He also indicated that, under testimony, that a neighbor may have cut the vegetation for ocean view, but that Dr. Tar wants to remain on good terms with his neighbors, and therefore he has not pursued the issue against his neighbors. To our knowledge, he hasn't submitted any reports or filed any reports to the Sheriff's Department for trespass or any other type of action, and he has not indicated to staff which neighbor or any information that might lead to who might have cut it if he didn't. The other point Dr. Tar raised is based on that, since county staff did not provide specific evidence that Dr. Tar himself or someone he hired cut the vegetation, then Dr. Tar should not be held liable irrespective of his ownership of the property. And on that point, he points to a section of our tree protection ordinance, subsection 17.10, which indicates, with respect to any violation of this chapter, the owner of the property on which the violation occurred is presumed to have undertaken, caused to be taken, or authorized the illegal activity. The owner may present evidence proving that the presumption is incorrect in their case. So essentially he's saying this provision indicates that an owner should be able to and can provide evidence that indicates that they're not responsible for something that occurred on their property if they can prove it and rebuke the presumption. Under the code enforcement's action that occurred at the January meeting, they essentially based the penalties on the fines specified in the tree protection ordinance and as recommended by staff in calculating the fine. They considered testimony from Dr. Tar that Dr. Tar was aware of past trimming, dune vegetation trimming, likely by neighbors, but he did not do anything in the past to stop it. They also determined that Dr. Tar, as the landowner, is ultimately responsible for the compliance. In summary, and staff's recommendation is that the Board of County Commissioners deny Dr. Tar's request that the board rescind the fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Roland. Any questions of staff?
Mr. Chairman, if I could add something, we had heard that Dr. Tar did take an appeal of the Code Enforcement Board action. We had not, in the county attorney's office, had not been served with anything. So this morning, in preparation for this discussion, I asked my assistant to pull a copy of the court agenda or the court docket showing the filing of the appeal and what's happened in the appeal, if anything. And actually, number one, we didn't find anything about an appeal filed against the county. What we did find was an appeal filed against the city of Vero Beach. I suspect that Dr. Tar misdescribed his appeal. Now, at the moment, I don't know what he has actually filed with the court. I do note that the order that he is trying to appeal was rendered on February 15. He has 30 days to appeal that. He filed his appeal on March 11, right near the end of the period of time. But the point of this discussion is just to say that at this moment, it's entirely possible that he has no valid appeal pending until we get the chance to look at that court file. But it looks like he incorrectly filed an appeal involving the city and not the county.
Okay, I do want to note just for the record that if he did misfile it, there is a lot of correspondence between Dr. Tar and the county, and in each case, he is addressing Indian River County. Mm-hmm. You know, in a letter to me, it's Indian River County. In a letter to Mr. Baird, it's Indian River County. He has had a number of people write on his behalf, and it's always to Indian River County. So it's not that he was unaware that it was Indian River County. He may have made a mistake, but he's been fully aware over a course of time that he's been dealing with Indian River County.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner O'Brien.
When I first heard this case, it was presented to me that Dr. Tar felt that a neighbor had come over kind of like in the middle of the night and trimmed the sea grapes back a little bit. And so I kind of had this vision of a little old lady with her little hand shears and trimming a few branches so she could have a little bit better view. And I thought, well, yeah, that does sound excessive for just a little site view trimming. And then I went out and looked at the property and looked at staff photos and realized that this is not trimming sea grapes. This is total just destruction here. And this is not just one neighbor going out. This is a work crew hired with heavy equipment, chainsaws, brush cutters, herbicides, the whole 9 yards. And if I'm a property owner and somebody came in my backyard and did this, I would be raising the roof trying to find out who did it. I don't care how good I want to be with my neighbors and stuff. I'd have the sheriff out there. I'd be interviewing every single lawn service that came in trying to pin down who did this. And it seems that Dr. Carr has spent more time trying to duck out of his responsibility here than finding out who committed the crime, so to speak. So with that, I have no problem making a motion to approve staff recommendation to deny the request for relief.
We have a motion from Commissioner Bryan, a second from Commissioner Flesher. Any other discussion?
Yes.
Commissioner Wheeler.
One thing that's been left out of this that I find probably is irritating or is inappropriate is the cutting of the weeds. Is a letter from State Representative Kriegel and also from Bob Starr, Chairman of the Charlotte County Board of County Commissioners, based on nothing but Dr. Tarr's interview or discussion with them, trying to use their political will to ask us to negate all this, when apparently they haven't looked at it, they don't know anything, they've heard one side of the story, and they decide to try and use their political clout to help a friend, and I find that very distasteful.
I didn't get him too far. I wrote a letter back to Representative Kriegel, and
well done.
Didn't have much
Your
influence.
definition of trimming is a little different from ours?
I guess so. I mean, and just to put this in a little more perspective, I mean, we just talked about the Sector 3 beach renourishment. I mean, anybody in the county understands that we're paying millions and millions of dollars. We're over $12 million on Sector 3. We've spent $30-40 million on beach renourishment over the past couple decades. And any landowner who's so irresponsible, he doesn't understand what the impact or possible impact on our beaches when this is done, is not fulfilling his responsibility as a landowner. And in my letter to him, I even basically strongly hinted that at a minimum we'd expect is a police report filed. I mean, Commissioner O'Brien pointed out what he'd do if he found out. I'd do at least that much, if not more. And to not even file a police report is just such wanton disregard for your responsibility as a citizen of this county that I obviously have no sympathy for him. So, there are no other comments. We have a motion from Commissioner O'Brien, a second from Commissioner Flesher. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you very much, Bob and Roland. Going on to the Office of Management and Budget, we have Children's Services funding allocations for the fiscal year 2011 and 2012. Jason Brown is going to lead us off. Good morning again.
Mr. Chairman, before Jason begins, this came out and apparently it kind of fell through the cracks a little bit. A couple important people. Brad Bernauer, who is administrator for the Children's Services funding, was not notified of this agenda item. Miranda Swanson with the Health Department, who's the chairperson of the Children's Services Committee, was not notified that this was on the agenda. And so what I would like to ask, I'll make a motion now that we table this for 2 weeks to allow the parties involved to be able to have some time to prepare a response instead of catching them pretty off guard here with no advance notification.
Second that.
We have a motion to table from Commissioner O'Brien, a second from Commissioner Wheeler. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
I would say 2 weeks would be the motion, please.
Okay, for tabled for 2 weeks. Commissioner Davis.
The motion to table is not debatable or amendable.
We're not under Robert's rules.
Just figure out help.
How does that help?
Can we go straight to a vote?
Oh, I see. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Appreciate that.
Can I say
You're welcome.
something?
Thank you for that clarification.
This is why I have you here on my right list. Commissioner, County Administrator.
Can I say something? Whether people's, I know there's needs, but I'm going to have to cut everybody. So
It's not a matter of cutting. It's a matter of transparency and letting people involved. I didn't hear anything about cutting. I heard people weren't notified, and I think that this board has made it very clear that we don't want to surprise anybody, especially when we can. And to have those people most involved be unaware of it until the last minute is not the type of openness and transparency that this board has been in favor of. Moving on, we have Public Works, the staff update on Sector 3.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Once again, for the record, my name is Chris Mora. I'm the Public Works Director for the county. This is our regular Sector 3 beach update. Much of the information you see on the top there, and this was distributed to commissioners late yesterday, much of the information you see there on the top you've seen before. I'll just focus on what has changed or information has been updated since the last update 2 weeks ago. The contractor is now in phase 2 of the project. He has placed approximately 105,000 cubic yards of sand on the beach for phase 2. This represents 37.7% of the 280,000 cubic yards for phase 2. As part of that, he's completed 3,300 feet of dune and approximately 3,000 feet of berm or construction template along the beachfront. That 3,000 feet is of the 14,000 total feet in phase 2. So if you go by beachfront, he's completed 21.4% of the project. So 21.4% of the project total area and 37.7% of the cubic yards. As of April 2nd, Saturday, last Saturday, there are 20 construction days remaining until May 1st when he has to be off of the beach. That represents 44% of the available contract time for phase 2 has now gone by. In order to complete the phase 2 volume, he would have to truck 485 truckloads per day, which he's not going to be able to do. His latest 1 week average was 197 trucks per day. And there you can see the weekly totals per day for the past week, and he averaged 197 over those days. We had projected originally that he was going to be able to do 200,000 cubic yards for phase 2, but now with the recent developments at the mine, we're updating that number to 160,000 cubic yards, being that he's only going to be working on one dredge for the remainder of April. He's probably going to be able to get 160,000 cubic yards. We had also at the last update figured that he was going to be able to, or he was going to be short 5,000 linear feet of beachfront, which is represented by this red arrow that you see right here, which extends from Seaview down to the north side of Treasure Shores Park. We're now anticipating with the 160,000 instead of 200,000 that this 5,000 feet of shortage right here is going to be closer to 6,500 feet of shortage, which would extend this red line down to past Treasure Shores Park. So this is the area that would remain unrestored or unrenourished as part of phase 2. Ranger has now formally requested, on March 29th, they formally requested a time extension to have a phase 3 or a phase 2 remainder that they would be able to work again in November of 2011. In order to do that, since their contract officially expires May 1st, what we would have to do would be to do a contract amendment to extend it for a third year. Some of the items that we'd have to look at in order to do that is we'd have to obtain an additional notice to proceed from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. We'd also have to obtain another special use permit in order to place sand next season in the Archie Carr Wildlife Refuge. We'd have another year of construction phase services by both county staff and Coastal Tech. And as we mentioned before, we'd have to perform an additional year of time-wise of post-construction biological monitoring. We have a current estimate from Coastal Tech that this would add approximately $700,000 to the project cost. The breakdown of that would be about $200,000 in additional engineering fees and another $500,000 in monitoring costs. As James mentioned before, we're meeting with DEP this week to see if they will relieve us of some of these Phase 2 remainder monitoring requirements. We'll keep the board posted on the result of that meeting in our next update. These are some other issues that you've now looked at their request for a fuel price adjustment, which was considered under consent and now been approved. And James will shortly be going over the next phase of Coastal Tech's work under Work Order 11. You've already approved tasks 1 through 4. This will be tasks 5 through 9, which relate to post-construction monitoring. And that concludes our update.
Chris, thank you very much. That was an update, no vote required. We move on to Work Order number 11, tasks 5 through 9, Coastal Technology Corporation, Inc., Sector 3, Beach Restoration Project, Phase 1 and Phase 2 Post-Construction Monitoring Services. Mr. Gray.
Yes, James Gray, County Coastal Engineer. What you have before you is Work Order number 11 from Coastal Tech for the Sector 3 Beach Restoration Project, Phase 1 Post-Construction Monitoring, and Phase 2 Immediate Post-Construction Monitoring. The total cost of Work Order number 11 totaled $823,641, of which tasks, and included 9 tasks, of which tasks 1 through 4 were already approved by the board on October 12, 2010, and that total was $316,243. Tasks 5 through 9 of Work Order number 11 total $507,398 and are for the immediate post-construction monitoring of Phase 2. This includes biological monitoring of the nearshore reef, as well as sea turtle monitoring of the entire project, which includes, again, Phase 1, and it also includes hard bottom assessment impacts. Staff has reviewed this work order with DEP, and DEP has accepted the total work order number 11, so the total $823,641, and has stated that it is eligible for 50% cost share. However, DEP does not have current funds to cost share with us, but we have county has 3 years to apply these funds for cost share. The recommendation of staff is or for the board to approve tasks 5 through 9, totaling $507,398 with Coastal Tech.
Any questions of staff?
Just, James, you're meeting April 6th with DEP to discuss some of the monitoring requirements on the unfinished portions of Sector 3 Phase 2, is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
I would be hesitant to approve this entire change order or work order until we know exactly what we need to do. I mean, if DEP comes back and says, yeah, you don't have to do half this monitoring, I think the work order price should be adjusted accordingly. So I'm hesitant to approve the full price when DEP might come back and say you only have to do half the work. So
I have a question too.
Okay, let me ask a question on that if I could first, though. Do we have time to table this until after that meeting? Is there anything in this work order that needs to be done prior to that meeting?
Monitoring starts May 1st. Our season for commerces and so forth for the offshore monitoring, the window really opens up May 1st. Our sea turtle monitoring starts May 1st also. So the work order would need to be executed prior to then.
But you said the DEP meeting was?
Tomorrow, right? The
Okay.
6th?
So
Yes.
We would have time then
I think we
to,
could accomplish that.
Yeah, there's 2 more meetings in April, so we could bring it back towards the end of April if that's the board's desire.
Commissioner Wheeler?
Talking about the 3-year window for cost sharing after the fact. And the way things are in Tallahassee, what are the odds that that'll even happen, even though there's a window for cost sharing?
Probably fine.
Every year, we have a local government funding request that we submit to DEP, and this funding request ranks other projects within the state of Florida. This year, we were ranked pretty low. The state would have needed to receive about $50 million to fund our Sector 3 beach restoration project. So it all depends on, again, ranking. 3 years is a long time from now. Hopefully the state would have been more solvent. But as of right now, there's no indication that funding is going to be available in 3 years.
Any other questions of staff?
Not necessarily a question, but I can't imagine the DEP coming back and requiring less inspection, but I think we can be optimistic, I suppose.
Michael, how much time do you need if DEP does come back and we do some the monitoring? Is a week enough time for you to adjust the work order, or would 2 weeks be better?
I think probably 2 weeks would be ample time for us to adjust the work order and plan and effectuate the work.
Okay.
So is that a motion to?
With that, Mr. Chairman, I move we table this item until the April 19th meeting.
Second.
We have a motion to table this until the April 19th meeting from Commissioner O'Brien, a second from Commissioner Wheeler. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you. Move on to utilities. Can you last and slap utility services? Just wanted to turn the page. Okay. We are going to take a break until 10:45. Thank you. reconvene the April 5th meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. Move on to Utilities Services, approval of work order with Geosyntec for groundwater assessment and monitoring proposal for Old Savannah Lift Station. Mr. Olson, come on up.
Morning. For the record, Eric Olson, Director of Utilities. What we have here at a community in Old Savannah off 16th, we had a fuel spill from one of our emergency generators. It exceeded 25 gallons, and therefore once it exceeds 25 gallons, DEP then regulates the very specific type of monitoring that's got to take place. What you have before you today is a request to have Geosyntec do the required monitoring, which means they'll drill some small monitoring wells, do the sampling, produce a report, and then we'll submit that to DEP.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
I do just come. Eric, 1730 Stonewall Drive, just where is that?
Old Savannah is the community. If you go west on 16th, it's on the north side of 16th over there.
Right before you
west
get
of
to
43rd.
You know where the stop sign that stops nobody?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
just east of
that's
that.
just
on the
about
north side of the
exactly
road.
near the big oak tree.
And then, Eric, I guess, what's our procedure on these? Do we have an inspection program? Because it says a small hole on the fuel filter for the emergency backup generator, and the leak 100 gallons, it seems like it either was ongoing for a very long time or it was bigger than a small hole. And just, do we have a regular inspection program to try to catch this in the future?
Two different things. Yes, we do inspect them on a regular basis. This particular one is not very far away. It's a pretty large size generator, 125 kW generator. It's a large diesel generator. But unfortunately, when it's stated as a small hole, it's kind of a relative amount because we clearly exceeded, we almost emptied the entire tank, is really what it amounted to. So I would say probably a matter of several days before we saw it. We don't see it every day.
All right, thank you.
Move staff recommendations.
We have a motion to approve from Commissioner Davis, a second from Commissioner Flesher. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much, Eric. Moving on to county attorney matters, settlement offer on claim on a bid bond for the North Water Treatment Plant. And that will be Alan?
Correct. Mr. Chairman, basically we have an offer on a claim that the county attorney's office has made on a bid bond, and the question today is whether you want to accept it, counteroffer, or what you want to do with it. To give a little bit of background, back in December 2009, the county advertised for bids for construction of the North Water Treatment Plant. In January 2010, the bids came in and were opened on January 21. Almost immediately, some issues were noted concerning the bid by the low bidder, which was H&D Construction. I'll come back to those issues in a moment, but in any event, the process went forward. The issues were resolved. The matter came before this board on March 16 last year for award of the contract. This board awarded the contract to H&D subject to a contingency. The contingency was quickly closed. A contract was sent to H&D to sign, and at that point H&D basically threw up its hands and said, we're in great financial difficulty, and for a variety of reasons related to that, we cannot sign the contract, and we asked to be released from our bid. We then turned around and filed, the county attorney's office, then turned around and made a claim on the bid bond that H&D had posted way back in January when it submitted its bid. That bid bond is for 5% of the bid amount. The bid amount was a little bit over $2 million, so 5% is a little bit over $100,000. The bid bond is issued by a surety, and as most of you probably know, once you make a claim against the surety then goes back, in this case over the entire bid process, looks at it with a fine-tooth comb and tries to find anything that has deviated from the bid procedures, which the surety can then use as an excuse for not paying on the bid bond. So in this case, the surety did that, and as I said, there were some issues in connection with the bid. The issues were the following. The bid documents required that a bidder base its bid on some pumps, certain kind of pumps manufactured by a company called Sulzer. And the bid documents went on to say that if you are proposing an alternative or an equal, then you still have to base your bid on Sulzer, and the equal will not be considered until after the contract is entered into. So H&D submitted a bid form which on its face was 100% compliant with the bid documents. The problem was, within a day or two, the county discovered that, number one, H&D really intended to submit a different type of pump, a pump manufactured by a company called Hydroflow. And number two, H&D had failed to include in its bid some cabling that they thought was not required, which to provide it was about an $85,000 cost. So that generated discussion between staff and H&D back in January, February, March 2010, and a solution was reached that H&D would be able to perform its bid if it was able to provide the the Hydroflow pump, the substitute or equal pump, and it would go ahead and do the cabling if all that could be packaged together. And that is what the board approved, subject to the contingency that the engineer on the project approved the Hydroflow as an equal to the Sulzer pump, which, as I say, did happen. Well, we entered into negotiations with the surety. Surety pretty quickly took the position that the county had not followed its bid procedures because it allowed H&D to proceed on a bid which was based on Hydroflow pumps and not the specified Sulzer pumps. And the county awarded the bid to H&D and considered the Hydroflow pump prior to entering into the agreement, whereas the bid document said it would not be considered until after the county entered into the agreement. We argued pretty hard on that while our procedure may not have been perfect, there was no material impact on the process. They argue that there is a material impact on the process. They argue that if other bidders had been afforded that opportunity, then perhaps we would have gotten a lower bid. Well, we never reached a resolution on that. We started a negotiation. They started extremely low, I think at $5,000, eventually went to 10, eventually went to 20, and we sat down in a meeting with their representatives and with their attorneys, and they eventually came up to $35,000. So that's the offer on the table, $35,000. A couple of additional facts. Number one, I'm not aware that the county has ever actually recovered on a bid bond. It's very unusual to do so. There aren't many cases out there in Florida. If you put the words bid bond into the legal search engines on all of the Florida cases, you come back with 3 or 4 cases which really don't tell us very much. The second fact I'd like to point out is we have a law firm out there, Bosell & Berg, which represents the county on a lot of its local litigation. And we went to Bosell & Berg and said, would you be willing to handle this case on a contingent fee basis if we do not settle it? They said, yes, we would, and they have tendered a contingent fee contract incorporating the standard rates approved by the Florida Bar, which is something like 40% up to the first million, et cetera. So we are under $1 million, so it's 40%. What all that means is if we were to reject the settlement and enter into that contingent fee agreement, thereafter we have to get a settlement better than roughly $60,000 to net the $35,000 on the table right now. And I should lastly point out that each party was concerned about the statute of limitations, and each party wanted to get a venue advantage. So the bonding company ran out and filed a federal court lawsuit against us, which they've not served. We ran out and filed a state court lawsuit against them, which we've not served. So that's where we are. Question is whether we want to accept the $35,000. Clearly, the county did not follow its procedures, but the real question is, did that have a material impact on the bidding process or not? I really don't think it did, but that's the factual dispute that we've got. I have recommended in my staff memo that I think we should reject the bid. I think we should come back at least 50% of the bond. And if that's rejected, then I think we should go ahead and sign the contract with Bosell & Berg on a contingent basis and have that in court.
Commissioner Wheeler. Yeah, let's assume that reject the counteroffer, and then we go to court, we'd be going for the full 100,000.
Correct.
What are the odds that a judge or jury or wherever this would go would give the 100,000, or would they possibly reduce it to less than the 60,000? Would need to break even with what they're offering now. In other words, what's the risk-reward factor here?
It's a winner-take-all situation. So in other words, the bid bond is $101,000. Either we get the entire $101,000 or we get zero. There's not an ability in this proceeding for a judge or a jury to say, well, we're going to give you half of it. That doesn't exist.
Okay.
So I guess the question becomes, what are the chances that we'll win 100%? And I wish I could give you something specific. I can tell you that ultimately it's going to come down to the question of whether us proceeding with whether H&D's bid, which was compliant on its face, whether that governs and therefore the bid was conforming, or whether the fact that we learned a day or two later that they actually based their bid on hydroflow pumps and failed to include the cable, which would make it non-conforming, whether, how that issue is resolved. And the second is whether our proceeding with H&D put other bidders at a disadvantage. It's kind of a factual issue. I honestly can't give you any reasonable prediction because we're going to end up doing discovery, depositions, things like that. I have not had the ability, to talk to H&D on this. They would become important witnesses. So it's going to come out to a factual thing.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Davis?
Just so I get clear on this, in the event that, and if it hasn't already, I think they have already filed bankruptcy, but if they haven't, would that change anything at all in this? Because this is between us and the surety company?
Correct. If they file bankruptcy, we may have to go to the bankruptcy court to get permission, but the bankruptcy court would quickly grant it because this does not impact
the estate. Okay. All right. Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Davis?
I move the attorney's recommendation.
Second. We have a motion to approve, to move staff recommendation from Commissioner Davis, a second from Commissioner Flesher. Any other discussion?
Yes.
Commissioner Wheeler?
Yeah, I can, I think we're putting at risk $35,000 to get an additional $25,000. Although if we did win, that would be money back in the local economy through the attorney's office. But, a bird in the hand is better than two in the bush.
Now, there's also one other step, though, as I understand it. It's that
the negotiation.
The attorney is going to go first before.
But we're approving that if they turn it down, to go ahead and follow through with the suit. So I think that gives us good negotiating ability with them to say we're going to sue them. But I would I'd like to see where they're coming from and if we can get the 50,000. I'm not so sure that I want to risk what we've got on the table for something that may not end up on the table. I'm just a little more conservative, I guess. Not much of a gambler.
Any other comments? We'll pull the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
The motion passes 4-1. Commissioner Wheeler dissenting. Moving to 13B, proposed resolution setting forth the board's position on certain issues relating to the City of Vero Beach electric system. And this will also be presented to us by Attorney Plakowicz.
Mr. Chairman, back on March 15, I think this actually goes all the way back to, February 1, Dr. Faraday did a presentation to the Commission on electric issues related to the City of Vero Beach electric system. At that time, the board asked me to look into the alternatives and report back, which I did on March 15, and at that time, the board directed me to go ahead and prepare a resolution setting forth the county's position on significant issues relating to the Vero Beach electric system. I did that. The resolution is in the package. I'm not sure you need me to tell you what it says. I'm sure you've all read it. I will add this, that the resolution was prepared prior to the letter of intent being received from FP&L, which I understand, I guess, came in yesterday. So if you go with the resolution, there are a couple of sentences that need to be adjusted to reflect the fact that an offer has now been received, or at least a conceptual offer has been received. But otherwise, bring back the resolution, hoping that it meets your desires.
Thanks. I know we have some people from the audience who do want to speak on this, so I'll give them the opportunity. Dr. Faraday, your name and address for the record, please.
Thank you. Dr. Stephen Faraday, 2120 Captain's Walk, Indian River County. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. We reviewed the resolution. The only area that would have to be changed would be Section C. I would like to point out that the thrust of this resolution has not changed with the FPL offer. There's still 21,000 county customers affected by this resolution. They're city customers for electricity. They'd like to join the other 55,000 FPL customers in the county. I'd also like to point out that although the offer is very good, there's still a couple of major issues that still have to be resolved that relates to the Orlando Utility Commission contract and the city's FMPA interests and how it deals with that, which provides about 45% of the city's current power. There are workouts available for that. However, it still has something that has to be done. I'd also like to call your attention to the 1976 vote by city voters to sell the electric system, the agreement that was signed by FPL and the city, which was then overturned by governmental jurisdictions. So there's still a long way to go. It's very important that the city and that FPL understand the county's position on this. Mayor Kramer has said he wanted to retract to the city boundaries. That still would be an important message in this particular resolution to tell FPL that even if the city wanted to do that, the county folks still want to go with FPL. Strongly urge you to support this. Right now, the rates are over 20% different between the city and FPL. As Glenn has calculated, you have to get down to less than an 8% differential between the rates until it's no longer economically feasible. So that's a long way to go. We don't believe the city can do it. We strongly urge you to pass this.
Go ahead. Dr. Faraday, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is this is still going to have to go before the Public Service Commission, and it seems to me that a resolution like this would be helpful so that the Public Service Commission would understand the county's feelings of this.
That's definitely the case.
Okay, so that would still give this, regardless of what's before the city council, it'd still be a real reason to go ahead with this.
Right, still clearly indicates that it lends support to the case that Glenn and I have got against the city before the Public Service Commission. There is a conference call with the Public Service Commission, Glenn, me, and the city on April 12th, where we'll discuss the 8 major issues that the Public Service Commission has laid out. Glenn and I have got comments on those, which will go to the Public Service Commission tomorrow to narrow and focus a little bit more on what the issues are. The forces are coming from different ways to try to help with what these decisions are. But the county customers, 21,000, which is 61% of the city's customers, want to get away from them and go to FPL.
And if the city actually wanted to sell to FP&L, this resolution would actually help them with that sale before.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Commissioner Davis?
Well, and that was where I wanted to kind of mention. We had some dynamics change in this, and I kind of feel uncomfortable sending it out kind of half-cocked. Right. I really almost would rather now circle back around now with the new dynamics of what has happened in the past 2 days here and incorporate that into a resolution. And I wonder in the time frames, and you know well better than I, what would be the drawbacks of us now putting something in here pertaining to that?
What, to the offer?
Yes, sir.
Well, I think only Section C would have to be changed. It says that Section C, for example, Alan, correct me if I'm wrong, a sale of the city electric system to FPL may eliminate the excessive rates and unfair subsidy practices which currently exist. The board urges FPL to make an offer. They have. So essentially what's flipped down to the next sentence is that with the FPL offer, the board urges the city council to seriously consider the offer. So it's just a slight modification to Section C.
And I guess I'd like to make a larger piece of Section C. With, on the surface of what we see there, you know, as far as with the total dollars that are offered, I think that would really, you know, here it is. This is not just an opportunity for the cell, it's an opportunity for the cell to be able to allocate the dollars for some of the things that are wrong, that we, you know, that they can be utilized for. And to me, that's very persuasive, and I don't know, I mean, if we're going to put something forth, I really want to make it the best we can.
Right.
Unless there's some reason that a week or so would.
Well, you don't know how much the details are going to go. What Glennon and I had been estimating with the model was that the value of the system was about $104 million. It came in at 100, so that wasn't too far off.
I'll say.
The other issues that we had said, we hadn't spoken to the issue of the value of the plant. FPL says it will tear down the plant. The other thing the city hasn't spoken to is if it did retract the city boundaries, if it discontinued having the plant, it would have to expend $20 to $25 million for transmission lines to do voltage regulation in this sector of the state. FPL is going to assume that. Also, we had assumed in our model that the city would have to use the $100 million and pay for part of that for the $14 million in unfunded liability. It appears that that's on top. So it's $114 million, $25 million for the connection point, plus the cost of demolition of the plant. Those issues can vary some. I think it's an extremely attractive offer. The things have been bantered around before, where I think it was August of 2008, City Manager Gabbard stated the value of the system was $200 million. They then got into discussions that it turned out was informal discussions. Mayor White had indicated the value was $400 million. When pressed, we identified that that was the total value of the replacement value of all of the city's insured interests. So this seems to be a value. It's under a PSC methodology.
No, I agree 100%. And I would like to get, and believe me, I'm not wanting to slow this down. This is not the intent of anything here. But what I really would like to do is I'd like to go ahead and get what they have as best we can in front of us with the FPL offer and incorporate that in our best foot forward with this resolution.
What about just referencing the fact that we encourage the city to move on with the FPL offer? Because, as I said, the areas with regard to FMPA and OUC, those are not proposed as to how to resolve them yet. So maybe if there's just a reference to the offer of the FPL dated April 4th, that would solve the problem, because then that contains the contents.
Yeah. Commissioner Davis, could you go with just the modification of item C to reflect our support to move forward with the offer made by FPL on the 4th of April?
If I've read it, I haven't seen the offer, but I'm kind of torn on this because I'm with you 100% on the issue and have been from the beginning.
I mean, I'm kind of torn with Delana and Denny, and
I agree. I agree.
Not going forward with this resolution and getting it out of the way and having it done. It seems to be everything almost that all of us have been talking about and working towards it. And obviously the city council still has charge with the responsibility of going through the details of the offer and coming up with what's best for its citizens. I think that's right. But I think for our purposes, the idea of going ahead and supporting this resolution and sending the message to the Public Service Commission that we are behind it is the appropriate step for the county to take at this time. Commissioner Wheeler.
It's not clear to me specifically what Commissioner Davis is trying to accomplish.
We had an offer. Or I say we.
The city had an offer.
Yeah, the city has an offer that, quite frankly, I think that is a game changer as far as in the big scheme of everything that we're looking at and where we're wanting to go.
Right.
And with that being the case, I'd really like to incorporate that into something that is as significant as this resolution to go to the wherever it's going to go, to the PSC and to the other players involved, so that the versus just to accept it, I guess we could put that in there, but
well, we're going to change C anyway. That could be incorporated in C.
Well, that's what I'm saying, but to just 3 words really trivializes the significance of a $100 million offer that's now on the table for them to make their decision on.
I think the PSC could understand that.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it comes down to what you want to do about that offer. I mean, if you want to say, yes, there's an offer on the table and we urge the city seriously to consider it, that can be done quite easily with what we have. If your intent is to kind of analyze the offer and get into it in more depth, then we can't do that right now because none of us have really.
I haven't seen it.
Plus, terms and conditions can change. If the concept is that it's a good offer, based upon what you've seen, to just reference the offer. The other thing is the terms and conditions can change via negotiations. Right. And what does that do in relation to the resolution? So it's just better to reference that offer as was submitted on April 4th, and then that way it references, people know in general what's contained in this document, and then that way whatever gets negotiated beyond that is fine, but still you're encouraging the city to consider the offer. That's what your thrust is in that section. So there's nothing inconsistent about it. To me, it doesn't seem to be a game changer. What it seems to be is a complement to the whole process to move forward and to get the county folks out of FPL. More of a compliment than a game changer.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Wheeler.
Yeah, I just a question. It just popped in my mind because of so many conflicts that Wesley's had with family, I guess, that it's come to forward that you know, I'm going to benefit from this because I'm on city electric outside the city, and Bob is also on city electric. So is there anything that would stop me from supporting this? I would hope not, but
No.
okay.
That whole world of conflict of interest, when you're talking about community-wide decisions, and the only impact on you is the same impact on, you know, a large group of community citizens, then generally that's not enough.
Want to be clear.
Yeah, Commissioner Wheeler, those conflict of interest forms are way overrated as far as signing one is.
Of course, in Wesley's case, the family is a large part of the community.
Are you getting all the attention?
I would add that the next to the last whereas clause needs a sentence or two changed as well.
The one that begins the city and FP&L currently engaged in discussions?
And then it says if an offer to purchase is made, obviously an offer has been made.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, we've had some.
I'm good with just having Alan update those couple sections, then send it on as it is. So I'll move the attorney's recommendation.
We've got a motion from Commissioner O'Brien, a second from Commissioner Flesher. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Thank you very much.
Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
You got to be a little louder, Gary, if that was.
Well, if you didn't hear me, how did you know I made a motion?
Because I saw Commissioner O'Brien moving around.
Go ahead, Glenn.
Sorry, Rock. Glenn Herron, 6985 57th Street. Just a quick clarification. Steve said that if the city of Vero Beach got their rate disparity down to 8% with FP&L, what he's referring to is the city of Vero Beach itself, not county, not Shores customers. The Shores and county customers, you'd have to get down to below zero before you'd want to stay with the city of Vero Beach in terms of a rate disparity. It's only for the city customers, and I'll add, only if you believe that once the utilities are sold, that the city still needs its $5.6 million transfer to its general fund. That's a big question, that when you create smaller government, do you really need that transfer anymore? So that's what Steve was referring to about the 8%. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Rock, your name and address for the record, please.
J. Rock Tonkel, Grand Harbor in the county. I had some more comments, but I think they're unnecessary at this point, other to simply say that you have supported those of us who've shown an interest in spirit and in action. And I'm personally delighted with the progress we've made, your involvement, and I think that you truly are representing the 61% of us ratepayers who are not represented by the city, never have been, never will be, and I applaud you for your action. Let me simply make one other quick comment. I made a short presentation to the joint planning and utility, the Finance and Utilities Commission of the city a couple of weeks ago. I told them that I thought, it was critically important from a philosophical standpoint to adopt the position of regionalization when it comes to water and sewer. I also indicated that I thought it was very important that they sit down with their counterparts and begin to deal with the multiple issues that might be involved. They reminded me that the county had pulled out of some discussion, and I don't know which one, frankly. And I mentioned to them at the time that I felt obligated, therefore, to bring it to your attention. I'm bringing it to your attention. I think the same language applies if, in fact, there's an opportunity for both parties to sit down and discuss the many issues that will arise. I hope you'll do that. I think you've expressed an interest in regionalization and combining the water and sewer utilities And I'm hoping that those negotiations can proceed in a deliberate fashion. Thank you very much.
Rock, to respond to that, there are a number of things that are already ongoing that will help further that along. We've got our utility director who's going to make a presentation to Indian River Shores at their April 28th meeting, and at that time he will actually make a proposal. It'll come before the county commission first. I mean, if this board approves that, we'll be making a proposal. We already have a joint meeting scheduled with the city of Vero Beach for April 29th, and they have a liaison, council member Turner, and I've just begun discussions with her to work on the agenda so that we'll be clear on what we want to go over at that time. So we are moving forward. We also have, under my matters, is an item where the commission, I'll see if the commission would like to send a letter to the city telling them that we at this time do not intend to renew the franchise with the South, or with the county residents presently served by their sewer and water system. So we are moving forward on a number of fronts.
Well, I may have misunderstood what they said, but I try to be a man of my word, and I told them I would bring my personal message, and I'm delighted to see that the kind of progress you just mentioned is forthcoming.
Thank you.
And Chairman, you've had several discussions with the mayor on this as well, correct?
I've had a couple of discussions with the mayor. My aim has been, for some reason it's hard to believe, but it seems as if the mayor of the city of Vero Beach may have gotten some information that was somewhat distorted in its transmission to him. So a number of times I've tried to use our CAFR, or used our auditor, in fact, to try to clarify that information and to get us all on the same page with the financial health of the county. Thank you for that.
You're welcome, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes, Charlie Wilson, 1057 6th Avenue in the county. Two quick things. First, I think it's important that you send this message and that you send it as quickly as possible. I appreciate what the motions that you've made. You know, we came here in, I think, 2009. Was when we first asked the council to become involved in the legal end of this, knowing that this has to go before the Public Service Commission, and it will end up in the Public Service Commission. So I appreciate the effort and appreciate your sending this important message. I've just left the city, and the opposition has already begun. As we predicted, no matter what the number was, it wasn't going to be enough. If it was $1 trillion, it should have been $2 trillion. So it's important that we keep it moving. Each of you, except I think one of you, have constituents that are on Vero Beach Electric. It is important that we now have champions. We have 5 champions to go forward and help those people get some relief. I want to also mention to you, Mr. Solari, that the memo that Mr. Bolton wrote about the effects of regionalization of water wastewater, which said basically that there would be no change in personnel and that there would be no savings to the citizens of Vero Beach if they were to sell, is absolutely destroyed by this particular offer. Because what they have done in this offer, in case you don't know, is in addition to the $100 million, there are hundreds of citizens who are guaranteed continued employment. There are donations to the pension plan that all of a sudden make Vero Beach's pension plan whole. Every single contingency that has been argued has been taken care of. This is a wonderful day. It is a game-changing day for the city of Vero Beach, and I want to appreciate your effort to take this to the Public Service Commission. We need to keep this moving. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Good morning. Name and address for the record, please.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm John Burns. I live at 1811 East Sandpoint Place in Vero Beach, and I'm president of the South Beach Property Owners Association. Our association has 2,600 electric utility customers, and I'm not sure that the remarks that I had planned to make are pertinent at this point, since you've already passed the resolution. But I'd like you to know that we in the South Beach fully support this resolution and all of the fine work that you've done. Try to get these folks in the South Beach off of the city of Vero Beach utilities and onto Florida Power and Light. So thank you very much on behalf of the people in the South Beach.
Thank you, John. Looks like everybody wanted to speak. We'll move on to item C, approval of a mediated settlement agreement for parcel 112 located at 4785 66th Avenue, owned by Phyllis Brown. And we have Mr. DeBrawl who's going to lead us in this.
Morning, Commissioners. Bill DeBrawl, Deputy County Attorney. Today before you, you have opportunity to review and approve a mediated settlement agreement between the county and Phyllis Brown. Ms. Brown lives out on 66th Avenue between the 45th Street and 49th Street. She owns a 2.0 acre parcel of property. We filed suit against her in 2010. The site is rectangular in shape, about 265 feet of frontage along 66th Avenue. It's outside the urban service boundary, zoned agricultural. Somebody made a change here. The only change that I'd like to call to your attention on the memo is on page 2. The appraiser, Mr. Trask, that was hired by Mrs. Brown, valued the partial take at $459,200. I erroneously put the whole value of $520,000 in your backup material. The other change I'd like to make is at the very bottom of the page. The county's first offer to Mr. and Mrs. Brown was $206,770. If you make those two changes, I'll go on. The parcel has a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. It's about 1,700 square feet, built back in 1935. If you take a look at the aerial that's up on your monitors now, you can see outlined in yellow, it's the take area. The parcel is outlined in red. The right-of-way line will come within 4 feet of the front door of Mrs. Brown. We proceeded to mediation on this matter. The county retained Mr. Spivey, Glenn Spivey, an appraiser for this. He came with a value of $202,700 against the partial take value of the $459,000 that was offered by Mr. Trask. At mediation, the parties agreed to a settlement outlined as follows. The county would pay the sum of $295,000 to Mrs. Brown. We will get a credit of the amount of good faith deposit of $168,300. There would be the statutory attorney's fees of $51,500 paid to Simon and Holloway, expert witness fees of $40,500, and upon entry of the stipulated order, we would go ahead and convey the Dawsey parcel. If you take a look at the Dawsey parcel, you can see in relation to each other here on the screen, the Dawsey parcel is here, adjoining the Brown parcel. There's a 2-acre remainder, 1.8 acre remainder that the county owns as far as the Dawsey parcel is concerned. About 0.8 of that is contained in a lake. Mrs. Brown has expressed the willingness to go ahead and assume ownership of that remnant parcel, the leftover parcel from the Dawsey transaction, where the county purchased the entire 3 acres of the Dawsey parcel. You can take a look and see the right-of-way line there on the Dawsey parcel. There outlined, you can see that the house formerly owned by Mr. and Mrs. Dawsey will be completely impacted by the county's improvements. That will be, the house will be demolished and removed. The only other agreements that we made in the mediated settlement agreement would be having the median opening moved a little bit to the south. That only has a cost of about $1,000 in engineering fees, and also Mrs. Brown asked for some sort of screening, so we offered up some of the palms that we purchased when we made the acquisition of the Benak parcel. There were 20 trees there, and if the commission remembers, that's where we notified Mr. Benak. He gets the palm trees ready, loads them onto Mrs. Brown's vehicle, and she's responsible for the planting. So the whole cost, property, trees, median adjustment, is $456,831. That's inclusive of all costs and attorney's fees. I outlined the risks that would be available even if the jury would come back and split the difference, true 50-50 split. Total verdict would be about $500,000, $491,000. So here, with the property going back onto the tax rolls and the payout satisfying it, staff recommends approval of the mediated settlement agreement. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to respond.
I do, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner O'Brien.
Bill, what's the breakdown now on Mr. Trask's appraisal, the value of land improvements and net cost to cure for just the partial take?
I had that up, but somebody must have zeroed it out. The value of the land was $51,100. The improvements, $23,000 even. Net cost to cure is $385,100.
Okay. I don't know how his improvements went up, but Mr. Chair, I struggle with these appraiser numbers. It's not as bad as when they valued the land at $150,000, but at $51,000 for 0.7 acres, that's roughly about $80,000 per acre for ag land. And I don't know. I don't know if we can get a jury of taxpayers to agree that that's a reasonable price or not. It just seems these appraisers' numbers, they just keep going up and up and up. And there's no justification for where they're coming up with these numbers. And at some point, I think we need to pick one of these and say, no, we're going to draw the line in the sand, and we're not going to just keep these appraisals ratcheting up like that. I'd like some time to do the numbers here because I did it based on what they had there. But and then even then, if that's the case, then the Dawsey property that were given to them should be valued at the same value of land as what they're charging us. So we're saying the 1.8 acres of the Dawsey is only worth $67,000. I think we should say, okay, if their appraiser says this land is worth about $80,000 an acre, then the land we're giving to them, the 1.8 acres, should be based on that same value. I mean, fair's fair. If they want to charge us for that land, then I think in retrospect, we should be able to claim the same value on the land we're giving them. And so I don't like this mediated settlement. I think we need to crunch these numbers and either say we want to go before a jury because we don't think a jury is going to say $80,000 is a true value for land right now, and a jury of taxpayers. And I think when we go to court, we should be saying it shouldn't be Indian River County versus the property owner. It should be the taxpayers of Indian River County, so that the jury knows it's their dollars they're talking about spending, and let the jury determine the value of the land, and then we apply it to the 1.8 acres of the property we're giving them. I just hate how this whole thing is structured. So.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Commissioner O'Brien, if I could respond. If we would proceed to a jury trial on this matter, we would only be talking about the partial take. We would not be talking about any land swapping or anything else. It would just simply be the county versus Mrs. Brown as far as this individual parcel and the parcel of property that we need for our roadway acquisition, nothing more.
It wouldn't be about the settlement cost?
It would not, no, sir.
See, Mr. Chairman, the way I understand it is basically if it goes all the way through to the trial for the eminent domain, the government can only take exactly what it needs and nothing more, nothing less. And so that's and that's why we do the resolution of necessity and all that, to go ahead and delineate that well in advance of any litigation. And Commissioner O'Brien, you're right. I mean, it's not right. It's expensive, and the county is getting drugged through a knothole backwards. And everything that you've said, I cannot dispute. However, I don't know how, as an American, I'd want it any other way when the government comes and takes somebody's land. And I know it's exactly everything that you just mentioned, but I can't think of anything that's been more difficult as a commissioner for me to sit up here and for a house that's been in the family for, since 1934, you said?
It was built in 35.
1935. And the reason why I say that, I guess, is because these families that are affected by this and involved in this, they're old-time families like similar to what my family is, and you know, I'm in a
bad, huh?
Yeah, that bad. But I know the connection to the land, and you know what? Our forefathers put something like this for the eminent domain process in place on purpose, and
And Commissioner Davis, I'm all for being fair, but I think this goes beyond it to the taxpayers. I don't think we're being fair to the taxpayers. Real quickly, from the number Bill gave me, their appraiser is valuing the raw ag land at $75,000 an acre. So if we take the 1.8 acres we're giving them, we should be getting a credit of $136,000 towards the settlement. And so I think, to be fair, I mean, to me that's fair. We're giving them 1.8 acres of land that, according to their number, is worth $136,000. I think we need to be fair to the taxpayers.
well, and I understand everything you're saying, and of course I don't then arguing it from the other side, taking the property for something less than that, in their opinion, is not fair. And these mediated settlements, I believe in this instance, both sides are going to walk away unhappy, but it's both sides.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Wheeler.
I'd just like to say, I think Wesley's articulated that very well. I agree with him. And depending on where you're setting in the negotiations, it's not fair on both sides. And, I've seen things that have happened in other states that don't happen here, but I don't like the prices we pay, and I do think we're being held up for a lot of these properties. But by the same token, we're taking something some doesn't want to sell, or maybe some do want to sell and they're playing the game. But the bottom line is if we have any property rights left, you're buying from an unwilling seller, and it's always more expensive. The difference between us, government, and other entities is we have the power to take it whether they like it or not, and other businesses don't. So I agree with Peter, and I think you summed it up well, Wesley.
I agree with Peter, and I believe, though, however, that Commissioner Davis is right. This is going through the knothole backwards, but that's what eminent domain is going to be, and it ought to be. So, Any other questions or comments? Chair will entertain a motion.
Move to approve the settlement agreement.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Davis, a second from Commissioner Flesher. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
We have a motion that's approved 4-1. Commissioner O'Brien dissenting. Next up is an offer of judgment on the Abazis parcel 102-401. And it looks like Mr. Dubral is going to lead us through that one also.
Thank you, Commissioner. If I could just get this set. If you recall the Abazis parcel, again, Bill Dubral, on behalf of the County Attorney's Office, if you call the Abazis parcel, this matter has gone through 2 different mediations. The board back last year rejected a proposed mediated settlement agreement where we would purchase the entire property for $805,000. Afterwards, the county went ahead and purchased the entire property at our appraised value of $585,000. You can see there on your screen, parcel 401 is necessary for a pond site. 102 is necessary for right-of-way along 66th and also 57th. We bought the entire parcel here also to assist with the construction of the bridge across 57th Street, which is now done. Yesterday they put the second lift of asphalt up there, and it should be opening in the next week or so by way of update there. What we want to do here is make an offer of judgment to Mrs. Abazis. We were unsuccessful at reaching an agreement at the most recent mediation, so we wanted to reach out to her with an offer of judgment. The advantage of an offer of judgment to us would be, if it is rejected, we go ahead and proceed to trial. If she does not meet the offer of judgment tendered by the county, she gets no reimbursement for any of her costs incurred as a result of the trial or 30 days after the judgment is made. So all of her expert witness fees, any transcript fees, anything along those lines as far as costs involved with the litigation would not be paid by the county. If she does accept the offer, the matter would be concluded. We'd go ahead and determine the amount of expert witness fees and costs, attorney's fees and expert witness fee costs, and go ahead and bring that back before you as far as a final settlement agreement. We have tendered, or we have suggested a tender in this matter of $750,000 an acre. I know that the Abazis want much more than that. Whether this will get it done as far as settlement, we don't know, but we want to be able to set a bar out there as something for them to think about and consider, and possibly settling the matter or protecting ourselves and trying to limit our costs. If there are any questions.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Duval? Anybody want to offer a motion?
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve from Commissioner Davis, a second from Commissioner Fletcher. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Bryant, this very well could be the one you were looking for.
I'm hoping.
Going on, we have Commissioners' matters, and the first thing under my matters is transparency. And this isn't a particularly big item, but some group evidently grades governments on transparency, and I pride myself on the fact that this commission is one of the most open and transparent commissions around, but for some reason they gave us only a B-, and my understanding is staff has been in contact with them and has gotten a somewhat improved grade.
Yes.
And I'd like to just have staff give us a quick update on that.
Yes, let me explain. What happened is they go through all of the governments, and they look and see what is on their website, and they rate them in the following categories: is the budget posted? Are meetings posted? Does it show the elected officials, the administrative officials? Does it show permits and zoning information, audits, contracts, lobbying, public records, and tax information? And we looked, and we did very well, except that we did not, initially they gave us a B-. Even though we show our audit on there, the person didn't notice the icon, which I think is pretty interesting, since it's a pretty good-sized icon. But then they found that, so they gave us a B. But we don't have lobbying information, and the reason, and we just have to have a statement, we don't have a lobbyist. That's all we needed, and that should get us a grade. The other thing is public records. We have to either have a form to get public records or have information regarding the law, and then we didn't have that. We're going to do that, and we should be able to get our grade. I will say, of the 67 counties, 8 got A's, 12 got, we're now a B, 12 got B's, 18 got B-, 9 got C's, 6 got C-, 6 D's, and 6 F's. So we did fairly well. We think we can upgrade it fairly quickly. But one is just stating that we don't have a lobbyist. So, and it's interesting, the counties that got 8 were large counties with full staffs to do a website. But we think we will not have a problem getting definitely a better grade. One of the things that happened is also how fast you get the information. They asked for everyone's salaries, and we did it very quickly. We sent everyone's salaries that was employed. So we'll add the statement, we don't have a lobbyist, and we'll put public records information on, and that should bring a grade up significantly.
Joe, I looked this morning, I think there's already a link on the website for a link to public record search. Is that?
Yes, we started working on it immediately.
Yeah, late last week we posted the statute that relates to public records requests. What we want to do is kind of add maybe like a Q&A section, and basically here are your rights under the Florida Public Records Law, and add contact. Obviously, depending on the information that's requested, there are different custodians, but we're aiming to have a clearinghouse like the attorney's office or through the administration office. So there's an email address. Somebody can send an email request. We're going to have the phone numbers and physical address if somebody wants to make a request in person, and kind of beef that section up. I talked to the lady who was the the contact that we talked to before and informed her that the audits were in fact on the website. She says if we make changes and notify them, they can do an updated review. And
That's exactly what I was going to suggest, is once we get it done to request another.
And all I want to say is that when I brought my report card home when I was a kid, my father never asked me how the other people did. He just asked me why I didn't get the A. So I think that this county just needs to shoot for the A and be the best we can, as the same way we are in everything else. So I think take it or leave it.
My dad said, son, that's a good C.
So with that, I think we basically have a consensus to try to do as much as we can to be transparent and to try to move that grade up to an A.
I didn't mean, I thought you liked statistical information, so I gave you statistical.
I appreciate that. Moving on, we have a water and sewer franchise issue under my matters, and this was driven by Dr. Faraday and Mr. Herron, who have suggested that this would be a good time to tell the city of Vero Beach that we would like to have all county customers transferred to the county sewer, wastewater, and reuse water systems at the end of the current franchise. I certainly agree with them, and I think this is something that this board should consider. And before we go further, though, I'll ask Dr. Faraday if he'd like to make any comments.
Dr. Stephen Faraday, 2120 Captain's Walk, Indian River County. We're strongly in favor of this. Sort of remembrance of some statistics. Out of the 23,000 city customers, about 4,800 are in the shores and about 4,800 in the county. 95% of the county water, county residents who have city water and sewer are in the South Beach area. There's some small pockets around the perimeter of the city. And we strongly urge that you consider advising the city. We would like to get out in 2017. 5 years notice is required. Also here today is John Burns, who is also president of the South Beach Association, representing the 2,600 properties in the area.
Good morning. Once again, your name and address for the record, please.
Good morning. John Burns, 1811 East Sandpoint Place, Vero Beach, and president of the South Beach Property Owners Association. The South Beach Property Owners Association fully supports the proposal to merge the WSI systems of the city, the shores, and the county into one integrated county system. By so doing, WSI customers in the three jurisdictions should benefit from the economies of scale the integrated system would bring. It's been reported that the city's WSI system will need to find additional funds required to bring its system into where it should be in order to serve its customers. This will probably mean increased rates for its customers. On the other hand, the county has made substantial investments in the WSI system, its WSI system, so that it has the capacity to serve all three jurisdictions without increasing rates. Just as is true with the city's electric utility, the people in the South Beach cannot vote for city council members who establish the rates for its WSI services. For these and other reasons, the South Beach Property Owners Association desires to transfer its customers now serviced by the city of Vero Beach WSI to a combined WSI service of the county. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in the audience? And there is the wording of a resolution attached, but this was provided by Dr. Faraday. It's not meant to be our resolution, just something that for us to look at and maybe help Mr. Plotwich. But I would like it if this board would make a motion to approve something like this and to have it ready by our April 19th meeting so that we'd have it sent to the city prior to our meeting on April 29th.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner O'Brien?
Yeah, how I view this is we actually have three options. We can renew the current franchise agreement. We can combine with the city and have a regional water utility system, or we can proceed with serving the Indian River County residents with water and wastewater. I think options 2 and 3 are still feasible. I think option 1, to renew the existing franchise agreement, no one on this board wishes to do that. Now, we have up to 5 years to send that notice of intent to not renew, but there's nothing preventing us from sending that letter tomorrow. And I think that's what we need to do, is just send the city a letter referencing those resolutions, saying it's not our intent to renew these franchise agreements. And that takes one option off the board and leaves regional and independent to go forward. But I see no reason why we just can't send notice now. We're not going to renew that existing franchise.
I think that'd be a very wise path. Commissioner Davis.
Just along those lines, what I think, gentlemen, and of those three options that you pointed out, which and I agree with you, you're exactly right. I think the most important is option number 2, which would be to regionalize and to make it so that every individual in the county can vote for the individual that raises their utility rates.
I'm 100%.
And with that being, and I only say this because I remember going before a different city council and requesting we have a joint meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And it was less than welcoming. And I'll just leave it at that. We have a different city council right now, and we're fixing to meet. And I think that whether we do this letter today or not, is almost taking our eye off the ball a little bit. We have really one opportunity at this next meeting on the 29th to use as much statesmanship and diplomacy to try to do what's best for everybody in Indian River County, which in my opinion is the regionalized system. I don't know that it's that significant. I'll tell them right now I have no interest in renewing. I will say that. I would almost rather just take that step immediately after the 29th and let's swing for what I think is the goal we should all have versus worrying about a franchise agreement right now.
Well, in that case, I mean, I think if we have no interest in renewing, which it seems like everybody has no interest in renewing, we ought to be upfront with that now and let them know that, so that they have that understanding as they spend the next 3 to 4 weeks preparing for that meeting. And I think that's the most upfront, the most honest path forward. And obviously, since some matters, I think it's the path we ought to take.
If you really think that would help them,
I really do.
Against cooperation.
Not only do I, but Dr. Faraday, well, who's coming up, also believes that would help.
I think there is no disagreement on the commission that you do not want to renew. That's a very important factor for the city to consider, because you're talking about taking away 20% of the population. The Shores is going to be making a similar decision shortly after the end of this month. If the city loses 20% of its population for the water and sewer, or the customers for water and sewer, it's got to spread its fixed cost. Let it include that in the calculations for the meeting on the 29th. If the Shores decides after that they want to do that, let them include that. Now they're down to 60% carrying the fixed cost for 100% of the system. It's to the benefit of the city to know your intent not to renew prior to that meeting. You owe it to the city to give them that information as opposed to holding it back.
I think by virtue of this meeting, they already know our intent.
There's a lot of discussions that take place versus a commitment of one path or the other. And that's what I think is important. You can have the talk, well, they talked about it, but they didn't pass it. And now you've got that thrown back, because that's exactly what they use in relation to legislation to put the city under the Public Service Commission, et cetera. All 5 of them said that they supported that legislation in January in this auditorium. However, when it came to voting for it, they didn't do it. It makes a big difference in terms of the passage of that legislation. So it's more important, if that's the way you feel, put it in writing.
Let me ask you this. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I just want Ms. Renzi wanted to speak. I just want to keep her there.
Yeah.
Sure, thank you. Ms. Renzi?
Yeah, we probably won't be able to hear you.
Name and address for the record, please.
Good morning. Renee Renzi, Waverly Place, Vero Beach. I'm sorry I missed my opportunity before. My concern is not with the rates and the service, but with the smell of the sewage treatment plant. Every time I take my guests over to the beach, we have to hold our noses. Will this change that? Will this lead to a dismantling of the sewage treatment plant?
Yes, it will. It might take 2 or 3 years before it's dismantled, but the county has the capacity to service this at both its west and central plants, so that the goal of the county would be to begin the process of dismantling the plant, while at the same time laying the necessary piping to transmit the waste products, and then eventually to have the plant torn down. But I mean, there are a lot of negotiations in place. It may be that the city ends up dismantling the plant, depending upon who owns the land and everything like that. But it would be the county's desire to move as quickly as possible, I believe, to stop utilizing the plant, which would end the smell, and have the existing county facilities process the waste.
Okay, sooner the better. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Davis?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move this forward, but also to consider Commissioner Davis's concern. I would make a motion then that we send a letter to the City of Vero Beach notifying them of our intent to not renew the existing franchise agreements that are referenced in Resolutions 8713 and 8714, but then add a second paragraph stating somewhat to the effect that we do so with the ultimate goal of having a combined regional water, wastewater system for all residents in Indian River County.
Okay.
I think that gives notice that we aren't going to renew, but also gives notice that that is our primary goal, is to have a regional.
We changed the word combined to regionalized?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. There's a motion from Commissioner O'Brien. Do I hear a second? I'll second it. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion?
Mr. Plotwich, I'm assuming that you've had the opportunity to look over the legalese of the franchise agreements for the service areas for WSI, and the timing and all that kind of stuff. Is there? Are we doing anything wrong at this point?
No. The agreements technically don't require anything. They say if you intend to renew, you would send a 5-year notice that you wish to renew. They don't actually require a notice that you do not intend to renew. However, I think that if that's your intent, you should provide that notice.
Okay, any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner O'Brien's motion is a letter of intent and not this resolution?
Yeah, I don't think we need all the whereases and everything. I think we can just send a letter saying that it's our intent to not renew, and we do that based upon our overall goal is to have a regionalized water, wastewater utility.
Got a quick sunshine law question, if I could. We're fixing to vote on something that wasn't advertised, I would say. And with it not being properly advertised and us fixing to make a decision, I would say it's a decision of significance. It's more than just a resolution as was in front of us here. Mr. Plotwich, what's your thoughts?
My thoughts are this isn't something that requires a public notice or a public hearing. It's an issue before the board. It was on the agenda, and I think that if you wish to move forward, you're not violating any sunshine law provision.
And actually, when I put it on, it was just to start the process to get a resolution, but since we're moving from a resolution to just a letter, I'd have no problem going forward with this today. Any other comments? We have a motion from Commissioner O'Brien to send a letter to the City of Vero Beach telling them that we have no intent to renew the franchise agreement that covers the services presently given by the City of Vero Beach for sewer, water, and wastewater when the present franchise ends, but a second paragraph saying that we still would like to do all we can to pursue regionalization. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And there are no other matters, so Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Moved by Commissioner Davis. Thank you very much. Everybody have a great day. Every once in a while, I just like it.